Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Ms. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Senator Brooks?
Here.
Senator Hammond?
Here.
Senator Harris?
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison? Assemblyman Levitt?
Here.
Assemblyman Miller?
Here.
Assemblyman Watts?
Here.
Chairman Moreno?
I am here. It appears that all members are present, and I thank you for joining us today. At this time, I would like to take a few minutes to allow the members on this committee to introduce themselves. And if the members would please indicate the district that you represent, as well as your goals for the committee during this 21-22 interim session. And we will begin with our Vice Chair, Senator Harris.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm Senator Dallas Harris. I represent District 11 in the far now southwest part of Clark County. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to keep Nevada at the forefront of infrastructure and energy issues across the state. We have an opportunity to lead. We have a lot of infrastructure dollars that have just been allocated, and I'm excited to see what we're going to do to make sure that we lead the nation in dealing with these issues.
Thank you so much. Senator Brooks.
Good morning, Chair. Senator Chris Brooks from Senate District 3, right in the center of Las Vegas. And I think this is just an incredibly important subject and a very important committee. I've seen firsthand how good policy from the state of Nevada can lead to economic growth. And I think that energy and the new energy economy is our biggest opportunity for economic growth and diversification in the state of Nevada. And I think that the policies coming out of this committee and the legislature can really be beneficial to that.
Thank you so much and welcome. Senator Hammond.
Morning, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. Senator Hammond, I represent District 18, which is located in the Centennial Hills area, which is sort of the northwest part of town, northeast. I don't even know, but it's north on the 95. And anyway, I've been involved with this particular committee for many years. I think the policy is so vital and incredibly important, especially now when we're talking about the dollars that are flowing into the state and the potential that we have to make sure that those are spent wisely. So I'm looking forward to having a productive interim that leads into a really exceptional regular session. Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome. Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you. And it was good to see you guys again. I represent District 33, which is right now, if you look at it, with the new district, it'd be half the state. From the Utah border, Idaho border, up into Humboldt, all the way down, wraps around Clark and hits the other end of the state. So that's half the state, basically. I look forward to this. We're having a lot of problems in rural Nevada right now with infrastructure, mostly communications. That's why I'm here today in Carson, is because we can't keep the computers up and running very long. So there's new companies moving in, and it's exciting what's going to happen for rural Nevada and the amount of money that's going to be put out there for some of the infrastructure. So thank you, and I look forward to this.
Thank you and welcome. Assemblyman Levitt.
Madam Chair, Glenn Levitt, Assembly District 23, that's the southern tip of the state. This is my second time serving on the Interim Growth and Infrastructure Committee, and I served in Growth and Infrastructure in the regular session, both regular sessions. I really enjoy this committee and what we do. Infrastructure is so important, transportation, energy, and just making sure that we we support all of our businesses and that we spend the money that's given to us wisely. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Assemblyman Miller.
Thank you. I am Assemblyman Cameron C.H. Miller. I represent Assembly District 7, which is in the southern part of the state, right on the cusp of bordering Las Vegas and North Las Vegas. Primarily, my district is in North Las Vegas. But I do represent some fine folks also in the Las Vegas, in the city of Las Vegas. Priorities for me with being on this committee, it is my first time on the committee. I am a freshman legislator. And what's really important to me is when we talk about growth and infrastructure is technology and the intersection that the emphasis that technology has on our energy, transportation, and our businesses, and as well as communications, like Assemblyman Ellison mentioned, across the state. So making sure that our technological infrastructure is up to par to welcome all the new Nevadans that are coming and further enhance the experience of being a Nevadan for those that are already here. Thank you.
Thank you so much and welcome. And last but not least, Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Assemblymember Howard Watts. I represent District 15, currently in the central east part of Clark County. I've had the privilege of serving on the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure Committee in both of my terms in the Assembly, and last session also had the honor of being Vice Chair of the Assembly Committee. I share the enthusiasm of many of my colleagues at the infusion of federal dollars and the opportunities that has to bring additional infrastructure improvements to our state. I'm particularly interested in making sure that we close some of the disparities that exist in access to that infrastructure. For example, Assemblyman Ellison mentioned getting broadband out to rural communities and all of our communities. That's something I'm very interested in. I'm also extremely interested in how we utilize some of these investments to advance us towards our clean energy and climate goals, and look forward to the interim. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. And I'm Assemblywoman Danielle Moreno. I represent Assembly District 1, which is primarily in the city of North Las Vegas. And I'm honored to serve once again as the chair of this interim committee. I have also served as the chair of the Growth and Infrastructure Committee during the legislative session. I'm looking forward to working with all of the members on this committee, as well as those that will be joining us virtually. Looking forward to getting updates about legislation that we've been able to pass and how that's working, but also the discussions of how we continue moving Nevada forward with other options that's been talked about by many of the members as they introduce themselves in the areas of infrastructure, transportation, and energy. I thank all those in advance, whether you're a person, a group, or an organization that will come before us to present information. Thank you for joining us over the next few months. We have a lot of work to do. As mentioned, there's a lot of money coming into the state, and we want to make sure that we use it wisely and that we take care of some of those sustainable issues facing our state. For those of you who are joining us virtually, our meetings will be long. Be patient with us, but they'll be exciting. We have a lot of work to do. And with that, I'd like to introduce our committee staff. Our Legislative Council Bureau staff, we have Ms. Margie Thompson, who is our committee policy analyst, Ms. Jessica Dahmer, who is our legal counsel, Ms. Julie Waller is our fiscal analyst, and Christina Harper is our committee secretary. Before we get the meeting started, there is some housekeeping issues that we have with every virtual meeting, but just want to make sure everyone knows them. Members, please keep your videos turned on during the meeting to ensure that we have a quorum, and be sure to mute your microphone when you are not speaking to minimize any background noise. And you may hear a dog or two in my background. I'll apologize ahead of time. Meeting materials can be accessed on the committee's webpage. Anyone who would like to receive an electronic notification of and access the committee's agendas, our minutes, and final report can do so by signing up on the legislative website. There will be a public comment period at the beginning and at the end of our meetings. The public comment is limited to only 3 minutes per speaker. Today's virtual meeting format is important to keep everyone safe, and I want the public to know that public comments may be provided in 4 different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. You may make your comment by calling in, and that number is 669-900-6833. Then enter the meeting ID, which is 895-9688-4779, and then press the pound button. You can email your comments to us at giinterim@lcb.state.nv.us. If you'd like to mail us your comments, please send them to the Research Division at 401 South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada, 89701. Or you can fax them to us at 775-684-6400. And I know that's a lot, but it's all on our agenda, all that information. So we do have a lengthy agenda today. So with that, let's get started. And we'll start with our first item of business, and that will be public comment. BPS, will you please check to see if we have any callers in that would like to submit public comment at this time?
Thank you, Chair. To participate in public comment, please press raise hand in your Zoom window or *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 155, you are unmuted on our end. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Christy Cabrera, and I'm the Advocacy and Policy Director for the Nevada Conservation League. We'd like to thank the legislature for your leadership and commitment to fighting the climate crisis. Climate change is the greatest threat to Nevada's future. It is threatening our water supply, habitat, and landscape. Extreme heat and wildfire are harming our health, our workers, and our businesses. To meet the ambitious but necessary climate goals of 100% clean power and 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, that were set by Governor Sisolak and the legislature, we must move away from all fossil fuels as quickly as possible. In order to do this, Nevada needs an updated state-of-the-art electricity grid and the ability to move clean, renewable energy across state lines. Today, you'll be hearing presentations about the possibilities and benefits of a Western regional energy market. In addition to allowing us to utilize more clean energy across the West, regional markets can also help us keep energy costs low, boost our economy, and provide more reliable energy. Nevada families deserve access to clean energy, clean air, and a clean environment. Joining a Western regional electricity market will allow us to sell our excess solar to other states, and it will get us closer to achieving our climate and carbon reduction goals while creating a cleaner, healthier state for all Nevadans. We cannot fight the climate crisis without the legislature's continued leadership and dedication to Nevada's climate goals. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 732, please go ahead. Caller, you are unmuted on our end. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Kyle Davis, and I appear today on behalf of the Interwest Energy Alliance. Interwest is the regional trade association focused on promoting market development for large-scale renewable energy companies, including solar, wind, geothermal, battery storage, and transmission developers and manufacturers. We were excited to support SB 448 in Nevada during the 2021 legislative session, and we're happy to hear these presentations from our colleagues expressing the many benefits of participation in a potential Western market. Interwest believes strongly in the importance of joining an expanded regional wholesale electricity market. The issues of Western states are intertwined and can be best met through collaboration and dialogue, principles that were envisioned through the passing of SB 448 and the Regional Transmission Task Force. As the West experiences a changing climate and legacy resources become less dependable and more expensive into the future, the ability to share generation of all types with neighboring states to utilize the strongest solar and wind on a daily and seasonal basis through expanded interregional transmission and enhanced market competition will both reduce immediate fuel costs while lowering the overall amount of capacity required to be built across the region. Nevada has shown itself to be a leader among its peers through legislation enacted in the past several sessions, ensuring that the state will benefit both economically and environmentally from the expanded trading that will take place when Nevada utilities join a regional transmission organization. Interwest applauds legislators for their bold action in recent years. I would also like to thank today's presenters for laying out the path that will enable our members to follow through on implementation of the important policies passed by this body. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next caller.
Chair, there are no more participants wishing to speak in public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will close our first order of public comment. Again, there will be another session of public comment at the end of our meeting. We'll move on to our third agenda item, which will be an overview of our Joint Interim Standing Committee rules and regulations. And we'll have staff join us to provide that overview. Ms. Thomas, if you're there, you can begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Margie Thomas for the record with the Research Division of LCD. Today, we have prepared a committee brief, which has been uploaded to the materials page of the website so that members can follow along. Assembly Bill 443 of the 2021 session created the Joint Interim Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. The jurisdiction and memberships of the Standing Senate and Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure are reflected in the committee. In addition, the Legislative Committee on Energy, which was a standing interim committee, was repealed, and the duties and responsibilities related to that committee have been transferred to this Joint Interim Standing Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Those duties include evaluating, reviewing, and commenting on energy use and policy in Nevada. The Legislative Commission approved up to 5 meetings for the Growth and Infrastructure Committee. On page 4 of the committee brief are the tentative meeting dates. Additionally, the committee has been, may request up to 10 bill draft requests on issues that address transportation and energy, and the committee must conclude its work by August 31st, 2022. So just briefly, this committee considers topics related to transportation and energy, which include highways, roads and bridges, mass transit projects, motor carriers, motor vehicles, traffic safety and laws, energy policy, public utilities, and renewable energy policy and programs, just to name a few. I wanted to point out that there are some relevant reports that members may want to familiarize themselves with. These are located on page 2, 3, and 4 of the committee brief. They include reports by the legislative auditor, by legislative committees, executive branch agency, and board. So if members are unable to access those reports, please let me know. I would be happy to get them for you. And finally, there are some priority issues of study this interim. And some of those are based on some of the bills that went through during the legislative session. Just briefly, there were the Senate Committee on Growth and Infrastructure were referred 59 bills total, where the Assembly Committee was referred 46. And partially that's due just to jurisdiction within each house. Some of the measures may not have gone to both committees and may have been referred to other committees like the Revenue Committee or one of the Money Committees, some of the other policy committees, including Government Affairs or Judiciary. But several of those bills this session, which will be studied once again during this interim, related to the DMV, such as funding and modernization, special license plates, transportation network companies, towing, traffic safety, impaired driving, transportation funding. And on the energy portion, there were several bills, and some which you'll hear updates today, which related to energy and infrastructure and renewable energy, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions, motor vehicle emissions, and broadband access. And finally, on page 4 of the committee brief are contact information for staff. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Jesse or Julie, and we'd be happy to help you. And with that, that concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thomas. Members, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Thomas before we move on? All right. It seems that you covered everything perfectly. Thank you so much. And with that, we will move on to our first presentation for the morning. We will have a presentation with the PUCN. I believe we have joining us Ms. Stephanie Mullen and Mr. Garrett Weir. So if you two are ready, the floor is yours. And thank you for joining us on our first meeting.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Harris, members of the committee. For the record, I am Stephanie Mullen, Executive Director of the Public Utilities Commission. And as you mentioned, with me is Mr. Garrett Weir, our General Counsel. Today, we're going to share an overview of the agency's operations and structure, including types of proceedings and industries that the PUCN regulates, as well as to provide an update on implementation from legislation during the 2021 session. With that, I'm going to share my screen and get started. All right. The PUCN is a regulatory agency that ensures investor-owned utilities comply with laws enacted by the Nevada Legislature. The basic regulatory duties, powers, and scope of work are defined by the legislature and codified in statute. The PUCN regulates approximately 400 investor-owned utilities engaged in electric, natural gas, telecommunications, water and wastewater services, gas and electric master meter services at mobile home parks, and some propane systems. Promoting and ensuring safe utility operations is a foundational PUCN mandate. This includes monitoring gas pipeline safety, including monitoring the design, construction, operation, and maintenance of gas systems and underground excavation. In 2021, the PUCN adopted important regulations requiring an annual leak detection survey of all natural gas pipelines. Nevada is the first in the nation to implement such safety regulations. Additionally, the PUCN's Rail Safety Division monitors 4 disciplines within the state. They are hazardous materials, operations, motive power and equipment, and tracks. The continuous involvement in monitoring and oversight of these safety programs help ensure our safe infrastructure in Nevada. In response to the unprecedented challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021, the PUCN maintained the agency's commitment to providing vital public services and ensuring a viable utility regulatory environment. Measures first implemented in 2020 continued well into 2021 and somewhat into 2022 so far. Adjustments included new work from home schedules and remote working procedures. The Commission adopted the use of virtual video conferencing and other remote technologies to conduct business, including pre-hearing conferences, hearings, workshops, consumer sessions, and open meetings. Notably, the PUCN was, to our knowledge, the first state utility agency in the country to adopt a framework for holding virtual hearings in contested cases, which involve substantial witness testimony and cross-examination on technical subject matter. In accordance with the governor's emergency directives, public commenting requirements were maintained with the implementation of special telephone lines so the public could call in during commission meetings and consumer sessions. Main PUC office phone lines also continue to be staffed, allowing the public to receive needed information and assistance with services provided by the PUCN's Consumer Complaint Resolution Division and business offices. Via its website, the PUCN continued to offer many additional services, including access to filings, online forms, links to video and audio, live streaming of proceedings, the PUCN's electronic filing system for submitting pleadings, and other information related to utility regulation. In early fall of 2021, the PUCN began transitioning to a partial work from home schedule, and the public again was allowed to attend PUCN proceedings in person. Some of the new initiatives, such as virtual video conferencing, remote meeting and hearing tools, and call-in lines for public comment, have been maintained due to their enhancement of PUCN operations through increased efficiencies. And now I'm going to go move on to the organizational structure, which also plays a very important role in meeting requirements set forth by the agency. The 105 full-time employees are contained in two distinct parts within the agency. They are the commission and the regulatory operations staff. The commission is a quasi-judicial 3-person panel appointed by the governor in staggered 4-year terms. Our current commissioners, Chair Haley Williamson, Commissioner CJ Manthe, and Commissioner Tammy Cordova, preside over contested cases and make decisions regarding the operations of public utilities. The regulatory operations staff, often referred to as staff, is an independent division that investigates and audits utility operations and participates as a party in proceedings before the commission. Careful attention is given to ensure the independence of staff, and the commission is prohibited from communicating with staff in any manner that undermines the due process rights of other parties. However, because the commission and staff are housed within the same agency, they share certain administrative support for matters unrelated to respective roles as decision maker and litigant in contested cases. And finally, I just wanted to make a quick note on funding. It's important to know that the PUCN is funded through an annual regulatory assessment or mill assessment and does not compete for general funds or money. The mill assessment is an annual collection that is made based on the revenues for utilities that operate within the state. Using reported revenues from the utilities and the PUCN's anticipated expenditures, we're able to determine what the mill assessment rate needs to be set at in order to meet the needs of the agency. And with that, I will pass it over to Mr. Garrett Weir. Garrett, are you there?
I apologize, I was muted. So for the record, I'm Garrett Weir, General Counsel for the Public Utilities Commission. I'm going to walk through the types of proceedings that the Commission holds and the various types of services that the Commission regulates. Ms. Mullen mentioned the quasi-judicial nature of the PUCN. It's an executive branch agency, but it performs a quasi-judicial function in presiding over contested cases. It also performs quasi-legislative functions in adopting regulations. Most of the contested cases at the PUCN are applications submitted by utilities, the most prominent of which are rate cases and requests related to resource planning. Resource planning is a process through which the Commission determines future needs for utility service and approves a prudent course of action for ensuring that utilities will be prepared to satisfy those needs. In a rate case, the Commission determines the cost of providing safe, reliable service to customers and sets appropriate rates for the utility to recover those prudently and reasonably incurred costs. Other types of contested cases are customer complaints and show cause proceedings in which the Commission considers whether regulated entities should be subject to administrative penalties or other corrective action for misconduct. Rulemakings are where the Commission adopts regulations, generally following legislative sessions to implement legislation. The Commission also occasionally conducts rulemakings pursuant to its general authority to adopt regulations necessary to carry out its duties. The ability to file a petition with the PUCN provides an opportunity for people to request general relief in the form of advisory opinions or declaratory orders regarding matters within the Commission's jurisdiction. And finally, the Commission regularly conducts investigations to examine matters related to utility service. We can go to the next slide. All right, the electric sector that the Commission regulates primarily involves 2 electric utilities in the state that provide regulated retail service. Those utilities are Nevada Power Company in the south and Sierra Pacific Power Company in the north, and they both do business under the name NV Energy. For the rural cooperative associations that provide electric service within the state, The Commission's regulatory jurisdiction is limited to their service territory boundaries. The policy reason for the Commission not having oversight of the terms and conditions of a co-op's electric service is that the co-op is ultimately accountable to its members. There's a political mechanism through which the leadership of a co-op can be unelected if members are unhappy with management decisions and the resulting service and pricing. In the electric sector, the PUCN regularly presides over cases involving rate making, integrated resource planning, and permitting. And as previously mentioned, there are many cases implementing numerous state policies and programs related to things like renewable energy development, energy efficiency, and consumer protection. These cases affect the prices that Nevadans pay for electricity, as well as the short and long-term planning obligations for utilities who serve Nevadans. The rates charged to customers of electric service consist of various components intended to recover particular costs. The largest component, which appears on your bill as electric consumption, includes fuel and purchase power costs and all other general costs of operating a utility not specifically collected by another rate. Other rate components recover costs associated with legislatively mandated programs related to renewable energy, energy efficiency, natural disaster protection, and low-income assistance. The rates set by the PUCN allow for recovery of only prudent and reasonably incurred costs, plus revenue sufficient to provide utilities with an opportunity for a reasonable return on capital investments. Notably, the PUCN does not allow NV Energy to earn a profit on fuel and purchase power costs, such as renewable energy power purchase agreements, or on operations and maintenance expenses, such as employee salaries. Finally, it's important for customers and policymakers to recognize that rate-making issues are generally zero-sum in nature. There are rarely win-win outcomes when parties are arguing about who should pay for costs that were incurred by a utility. Allocating fewer costs to one party will result in allocating greater costs to another. Inevitably, the losers in the decision-making process will be unhappy with the results, causing the PUCN to regularly draw the ire of nearly every industry and type of utility customer within the state. For parties who believe that a commission decision is inequitable or unlawful, there are processes in place to seek an appeal, first at the administrative agency level through reconsideration or rehearing of a matter, and then subsequently through judicial review by the state's courts. So we can go to the next slide. The PUCN regulates two investor-owned natural gas utilities. Those are Southwest Gas Corporation and Sierra Pacific Power Company, which, in addition to providing electric service throughout northern Nevada, also offers gas service in the Reno area. For these utilities, the PUCN holds proceedings that set rates and implement legislative policies such as the promotion of energy conservation and the use of renewable natural gas. The PUCN also licenses alternative sellers of natural gas who provide service to large industrial and commercial users in the state. Finally, the PUCN oversees gas pipeline safety in partnership with the United States Department of Transportation's Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA, within the Office of Pipeline Safety. As with electric utilities, natural gas utilities recover the costs of purchased fuel, that is the natural gas that they sell to customers, on just a dollar-for-dollar basis. They aren't allowed to mark up the cost of the natural gas that they sell. The return on their investments the return is on the investments that they've made in the infrastructure necessary to deliver the natural gas. We can go to the next slide. In the sector of water and wastewater, the PUCN's primary regulatory activities include ensuring the delivery of clean, safe, and reliable service to customers at reasonable rates. The PUCN monitors the quality of service, environmental compliance, and financial performance. The Commission fully regulates the rates, service quality, and service territories of 27 investor-owned water and wastewater utilities in the state, serving approximately 23,000 customers. The Commission regulates the service territories, but not the rates or service quality of water and wastewater utilities under the control of certain non-investor-owned governing bodies, such as cooperative associations and homeowners associations. We can go to the next slide. For rail, as Executive Director Mullen mentioned, the Commission has personnel who regularly perform inspections and have specialized training in the areas of inspection that enforce federal regulations. Those disciplines include operations, practice inspection, motive power and equipment, track inspection, and hazardous material inspection. You can go to the next slide. For telecommunication, which is largely a deregulated utility service, the Commission does fully regulate fully rate regulate certain small scale providers within the state in rural areas. There are 10 of those, and the rest of the commission's 322 telecommunications providers are comprised of incumbent local exchange carriers and competitive suppliers. The commission does not rate regulate those entities. It regulates programs that some of those entities are able to draw from federally and at the state level, however. For example, there are 30 eligible telecommunication carriers in the state which are able to access federal Lifeline program funding. 26 of those receive federal Lifeline support to provide discounted telecommunication services to low-income customers, including mobile service and broadband access. We also have 9 eligible telecommunication carriers receiving high-cost support in the state to subsidize the build-out to more rural areas where the cost of providing service is more expensive. You can go to the next slide. So utility regulation continues to evolve with the development of new technologies, changing customer preferences, and ambitious public policies intended to advance the safety and reliability of service, as well as promote conservation, environmental protection, and economic development. As a result, the PUCN's duties expand every year, and the issues before the Commission continue to grow in complexity. We're constantly addressing exciting, nuanced issues that affect all of Nevada's residents and visitors. As I mentioned, it's often difficult for the PUCN to arrive at outcomes that please everyone, but the people and processes at the agency are focused on achieving evidence-based decisions that equitably balance the interests of utilities and consumers. The PUCN embraces its changing role, which now includes facilitating innovation where appropriate to advance the public interest. Increasingly, the Commission is faced with unprecedented proposals that require problem solving and thoughtful consideration of costs, benefits, and risks to advance public policy while protecting ratepayers. And with that, my portion of the presentation is concluded. I'm going to hand it back to Director Mullen, who will be providing a brief update regarding the Commission's implementation of legislation from last session, with the exception of SB 448, which I will address later during agenda item 6.
All right, for the record, Stephanie Mullen, Executive Director of the Public Utilities Commission. Thank you, Garrett. And as he mentioned, I was going to provide a brief overview of where we are at with the recent legislation passed. So I'll go ahead and start with SB 14. This sets into law cooperation among government agencies regarding emergency resource plans. This bill requires that on or before June 30th of each year, the Public Utilities Commission, the Division of Environmental Protection of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and the Governor's Office of Energy coordinate with the Division of Emergency Management to annually compile a list of each utility and provider of new electric resources that is required to submit a vulnerability assessment and an emergency resource plan. SB 18 significantly updates the Commission's maximum administrative fines for violations. The fines increase from a maximum of $1,000 per day to $200,000 per day, with a cumulative cap of $2 million for gas storage or transportation violations of a Commission regulation. For other violations of rule, regulation, order, or providing materially inaccurate or misleading information, the daily cap is $100,000 per day and $2 million for a series of violations. If the Commission determines a violation was willful or detrimental to public health or safety, the caps are $200,000 per day and $5 million cumulative. To balance out the increase in maximum fines, the law requires the Commission to consider certain factors in determining the amount of an administrative fine, such as the circumstances of the violation, including the impact, whether financial or on public health and safety, willfulness of violation, the good faith of disclosure of the violation, the good faith to achieve compliance after the violation, the history of the compliance or non-compliance, the economic benefit of the violation or lack thereof to the person charged, the amount of administrative fines assessed previously by the Commission for similar violations, and such other factors as necessary to determine the reasonableness of the administrative fine. SB 59 clarifies that briefing schedule for petitions for judicial review of decisions by the PUCN is limited to an opening brief and responsive brief only, and that no reply brief may be filed. The clarification is significant because the Commission is exempt from the judicial review process of the Nevada Administrative Procedures Act, which permits a reply brief to be filed. SB 77 exempts from the requirements of the open meeting law certain meetings conducted by a public body engaged in pre-decisional and deliberative discussions relating to an action under the Federal National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, including without limitation, the review and discussion of drafts of environmental impact statements describing the environmental effects of proposed actions within the jurisdiction of the public body. SB 387 requires the Commission to adopt regulations to establish rate caps and certain limitations on charges for an inmate calling service and to approve a schedule or tariff that exceeds such a rate cap or fails to comply with a limitation prescribed by the Commission. The Commission is also to review the program annually and revise rate caps or limitations if it is found necessary to do so. The Commission initiated a rulemaking in docket number 21-12013 to implement this bill. The workshop is set for March 17th, 2022 at 10 a.m. AB 154 modernizes notification by public utilities to include electronic notices. AB 154 further eliminates the requirement of fluorescent bill stuffers for notices and statements and requires that rate adjustments be in clear and bold text, regardless of the method of transmission. AB 173 removes the exemption from licensure as a professional engineer for an employee of a public utility company that supplies natural gas and is subject to the jurisdiction of the PUCN if the employee is engaged in a type of work for a public utility company that the PUCN has determined requires a license. Prior to the passage of AB 173, employees of interstate or intrastate public utility companies were exempt from licensing requirements while they were engaged in work for those companies. The Commission opened a rulemaking in docket number 21-06039 to implement this bill. A proposed regulation is pending and has been submitted to LCB for review. And this concludes this portion of our presentation, and Mr. Weir and I are available should you have any questions.
Thank you so much. I know for all of the members of this committee, they've all served during the regular session on growth and infrastructure, but you can't have enough information. I appreciate the update. And for those watching that may not have known what the PUCN does, now you do. Members, do you have any questions for the presenters, the information presented? If you do, just raise your hand. Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Mullen, Mr. Weir, for the presentation. You mentioned during the presentation, that there are through these dockets a lot of kind of new emerging issues. So you spoke, I think, with great detail about kind of the implementation of legislation. Are there other emerging issues that are coming up through the Commission, and specifically? I know that the Commission has started to integrate climate goals into its organizational planning. And so if you could just speak to any emerging issues and how climate is and our state climate goals are starting to be integrated into kind of the considerations of various utility dockets, I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Great. For the record, this is Garrett Weir. Thank you, Assemblyman Watts. So I guess first you hit directly on one of the issues related to climate goals is the way in which the Commission and utilities need to plan long-term to achieve those goals. That's something that's requiring us to look at things differently than we have historically. And for utilities to think about carbon emissions and what it will take to allow systems to reduce their reliance on those non-renewable resources. So, and that affects more than just the electric sector. The natural gas sector, obviously relies on a carbon emitting fuel. And so the Commission is undertaking an investigation right now that's pending at the Commission. That's docket number 21-0502, where we're looking at some of the long-term planning, the questions that arise from these climate goals, and then just frankly, every resource planning proceeding we have for electric utilities is increasingly taking into account those climate-related goals. We have new components. It seems like almost every legislative session that are added to the resource planning process. For the first time, we had a comprehensive distributed resource plan that was examined within this last, this last resource plan that has been partially ruled upon. There's recent, and we'll talk about this in the upcoming agenda item, but there's a transmission component that is largely motivated by the ability to access renewable resources in other markets. And then you have even the electric vehicle infrastructure planning is another component of the resource planning process that's been incorporated. But that's just from a system operation standpoint, just the very fundamental part of regulating utilities. That's a major, those are changes that we're seeing regularly. And then, somewhat relatedly, we see customer preferences changing, where certain customers are wanting to receive service that is carbon-free in the resources that are relied upon. And we're also seeing customer preferences or expectations change as to pricing, the way in which they take their utility service. So, just those are a few of the changing innovative concepts that are coming before the commission. And as I've mentioned, a lot of the proposals are unprecedented, not just in Nevada, but anywhere. And so we're on the forefront of some really interesting times. And it's exciting for us, but it is challenging for sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions for our presenters before we move on? Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. My question kind of builds upon Assemblyman Watt's question and the added kind of roles and responsibilities that the commission has over the last several years. And do you, and I know that the agency is funded through the mill rate assessment and not in the general fund. And do you feel that that mill rate is sufficient to fund the agency based upon the added roles and responsibility that the legislature and just the industry have created for the agency over the last several years?
Stephanie Mullen for the record. Thank you, Senator Brooks, for the question. At this time, I think that our mill, I think it's currently at 3.13 is what we set it at last May. Our cap, as you all are aware, is 3.5. So we're well under our cap at this moment. And all of this is subject to change based on the needs of the agency, bills that are passed, positions that we gain, fluctuating gas prices. With gas prices as high as they've been, we've been able to collect what we need. But it's hard to say. I think that's kind of up to the legislature and the asks that we have moving forward. I don't know, Mr. Weir, do you have anything to add?
Well, I might just add, we do our best, as Ms. Mullen mentioned, to ensure that we can fund the agency. We actually, there were some benefits from a cost standpoint, or given over the pandemic, we certainly had some reductions, I believe, in costs. But we also saw revenues increase for some of the utilities because of the price of natural gas increasing. And again, that mill assessment is applied to revenues, not the net profits of a utility. And so, but certainly we have been exploring how we can ensure that long-term the agency can be adequately funded. And there are some statutory restrictions that could in the future jeopardize the agency's ability to be adequately funded if things should change. And so while right now we aren't facing a crisis, we certainly want to avoid a crisis in the future. And so we've been looking at some, not just possible changes to the way that the mill assessment is designed right now in statute, but even trying to be creative in examining how we might be able to fund the agency more through fees, for filing fees, other things that could reflect more or could create revenue based on the extent to which the agency, or based basically on the types of work that the commission's doing, and you have the applicants paying a more proportionate share of the agency's costs as a result. But those are things we're exploring, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see some sort of proposal from us as the session approaches to look into statutory solutions to ensure that we have the resources necessary in the future to address this growingly complex field.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions from members? Okay. Seeing none, I thank you both for the presentation, and I know we'll be seeing you a little later in our agenda. With that, we will close the presentation on agenda item 4 and move on to agenda item 5, which will be an update of the implementation of the Expanded Solar Access Program, also called the ESAP. As many of you may recall, during the 2019 legislature, we passed Assembly Bill 465, which required certain electric utilities to offer an expanded solar access program to residential customers and to certain non-residential customers who consume less than 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per month. The Public Utilities Commission of Nevada was required to adopt regulations establishing the standards for the program. First, we will hear from Ms. Cynthia. I'm going to kill your last name, so I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. I'll have you do that with Nevada Energy about the implementing of the program. And following her presentation will be Carlene Johnson and Roberta Tapia with the Employment Security Division of the Department of Employment and Training and Rehabilitation to provide an overview of the workforce development component of the program. So with that, Cynthia, the floor is yours. And forgive me on the last name.
Oh. Okay, there I am. No worries. Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Cynthia Almeida, and I am the Director of Contract Management and Special Programs here at NV Energy. I am very excited to be here with all of you this morning and provide this update on the Expanded Solar Access Program, where we stand on the implementation and what our next steps are. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, hoping that I do this correctly. Okay, so I'm going to assume that my screen is being shared, so I'll go ahead and get started. Like Chairwoman Moreno mentioned, Assembly Bill 465 was enacted in 2019, which required NV Energy to offer this program to certain residential, non-residential customers. That essentially breaks up into 3 types of categories: low-income customers, or disadvantaged businesses and nonprofits, as well as the eligible premise customers as defined per the legislation. NV Energy was at the forefront of supporting this legislation in 2019, as well as a number of stakeholders, which include Chispa Nevada, the Organizing Alliance, Nevada Conservation League, and a few others, which also participated in the rulemaking for the Expanded Solar Access Program, or ESAP, the way we like to call it. Like the Assemblywoman mentioned, ESAP is intended to offer our residential and non-residential customers the opportunity to have their electric consumption come from a mix of utility large-scale renewable energy projects, as well as these community-based solar resources, which are projects that will be located in certain areas within the state that are no greater than 1 megawatt in size. The great part of ESAP is that it allows for these customers to get these type of renewable energy resources into their home without actually requiring that solar panels be installed. To give a quick procedural overview, so on December 1, 2020, NV Energy filed with the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada, the PUCN, our ESAP application, which outlined the initial ESAP implementation plan for 2021. This is in docket number 20-12003. The participating parties in this particular docket were the Bureau of Consumer Protection, our PUCN staff, Sierra Club, MGM Resorts International, and Caesars Enterprise Services, LLC. As you can see here, the quick schedule, we had testimony filed in March. Our participating parties also filed their respective testimonies April 22. We filed our rebuttal testimony May 7th, with the hearing ultimately on May 22nd at 2021. We did receive final approval of our plan with certain modifications on June 29th, 2021. I also want to highlight that at the same time, we were also working and participating in docket number 19-06028, which enacted the regulations to carry out Assembly Bill 465. These regulations were finalized as of December 9th, 2021. So like I briefly mentioned earlier, ESAP contains 3 customer categories in which eligible applicants can apply into. We have the low income eligible customer category, the disadvantaged business or nonprofit organization category, and the eligible premise customer category. As you can see here, there's a particular criteria that need to be met by the applicants to determine which category they would fall under for ESAP. I also want to make note that the low income eligible customer category is the only category that is guaranteed a lower rate per the legislation. Furthermore, each category has certain capacity amounts allocated as outlined per AB 465. For Nevada Power Company, the total capacity allocation is 240,000 megawatt hours. And for Sierra Pacific Power Company, the total capacity allocation is 160,000 megawatt hours. These capacity amounts are further broken down by each of these 3 categories that I described earlier. And you can see here on the chart how they're broken up. So for example, for Nevada Power Company, the low income eligible category has 60,000 megawatt hours allocated to that particular category from the 240,000 megawatt total. So we just break it up here so that it's easy to see. The other thing that we wanted to make sure was not to exceed the capacity amount that's allocated so that we don't contradict or go above the limits as allowed per AB 465. So we have a 10% capacity reserve for each category. So that means that although this low income category under Nevada Power is 60,000 megawatt hours, we keep in mind a 10% reserve. So the total ends up being closer to the 54,000 megawatt hours. That's just to make sure that customers who are part of this program, if their energy needs increase in one particular year, we don't exceed that limit. To give you a bit of a timeline here, as I mentioned earlier, we have the few dates that when we submitted the plan, when we received approval, and then of course, when we actually implemented the plan. As you can see, we had about a month to implement the approved plan directives. We were very excited to get that approval and start working on how we plan to implement this. And we did start our community outreach on August 2nd. Again, like I mentioned here, and I can go into a little bit more of a detail in the other slides, but the application submittal period for our customers to enroll was between September 1 and October 31 of 2021. We did this review during that time frame, but gave ourselves an extra month to be able to process any applications that came in towards the end of October. The selection process occurred between December 1 and December 10th. Result of these customers, whether they were accepted into ESAP, occurred between December 11th and December 31, and the program is effective as of January 1 of this year. We do have a few regulatory requirements, which I'll get into in a few slides here, but we do have an information report where we will provide this information in further detail that is due March 1 of 2022. So like I mentioned, we tried to launch marketing as soon as possible. And we did commence this outreach as of August 2nd, 2021, with the launch of the website and dedicated flyers on information on how to nominate these community-based solar resources. During the time frame of ESAP enrollment, ESAP, CBSR nominations, we did a few marketing efforts statewide that included print media, radio spots, billboards, bus shelters, social media, and direct email to our customer base, particularly those that we had some information that would allow us to believe that they would be eligible for these categories. So just a few examples of what our marketing efforts look like. Here's a few of the print media. As you can see, we also had some of this information in Spanish, which was very helpful. For our billboards and bus shelters, which I'm hoping a few of you were able to see. It was very exciting to drive and see ESAP on the billboards. I'm hoping that you all had a chance to see these as well. And on bus shelters. And social media. I know that I was bombarded with a lot of our social media presence, which made me very excited, and I'm hoping that you were able to see that as well. So to get a little bit more into the customer enrollment process. So our applicants submitted their ESAP application and the related documentation that provided information on how they met the eligibility criteria for whatever category they were applying for occurred between September 1 and October 31. Customers were able to apply via mail, and we also would mail out an application if requested, or they could send an email to esap@nvenergy.com. We tried to make it rather easy for someone who wanted to apply online by being able to click on our website, and it would pop up where it would go to and make sure that it reminded applicants that the documentation had to be provided as well. So we are working on improving that process, but we did see a lot of applications come through that in that manner. When we did receive applications, we reviewed them to determine any eligibility, if they met the eligibility requirements or if they were deficiencies. Depending on whether the customer is eligible or deficient, we would provide them with either a notice of eligibility or a notice of deficiency. The notice of deficiency really focused more on either a customer not providing an attached document, or we just received the wrong application, or we only received the application. So again, to make sure that the customer met the eligibility criteria for these categories, they had to provide supporting documentation as outlined in the application. Official acceptance to ESAP was provided to those who were eligible between December 11 and December 31. And as I mentioned, the program went into effect as of January 1 of 2022. So I do want to give a quick overview of the final customer enrollment results, and keeping in mind that this program is new, very early in its infancy. Statewide, there were a lot of events that occurred during the timeframe of open enrollment. And we do believe that now that we've gone through at least one round, that we are better able to focus our marketing efforts based on what we saw this first go around. So for the low income eligible customer, you'll see that for Nevada Power and Sierra Pacific Power, this is where we received the most interest, which is what we expected, given that this is the category that guarantees a lower rate. So we did receive a total number of applicants. And I'll just provide an example for Nevada Power of 1,672. Out of those, only 1,175 were deemed eligible. That means that the other customers either did not provide the documentation needed or they did not meet the eligibility criteria. Out of the total amount that were eligible, that totaled up to about 16,215 megawatt hours of consumption for that category. So when I mentioned the capacity allocations for each category as outlined by AB 465, that's where the 60,000 megawatt hour allocation goes to, not including the 10% reserve. So here you'll see a little bit of the snapshot of what we will be providing additional detail in that March 1 filing. But I did want to at least highlight it here so that you all had it in your presentation. So on the community-based solar resources, I kind of consider ESAP a two-pronged plan. We have the customer enrollment part, which is really focused on getting customers to participate in ESAP. And then we have the community-based solar resources portion. This is what actually launched as of August 2nd of 2021. And per AB 465, we are required to build a minimum of 3, but no more than 10 community-based solar resources in each service territory. On August 2nd, we launched our first nomination period. And you can see that we received a total of 13 nominations for Southern Nevada and 7 nominations for Northern Nevada. We were very excited to see the interest in the sites that were nominated, especially given that we had about a month from when the order was finalized to get everything ready and launch our first part of ESAP. Here's kind of a timeline of our CBSR process. Our nomination period ended September 10th of 2021, and NV Energy conducted the scoring of all the nominated sites by October 25th of 2021. We then shortlisted the selected sites on October 26th, and between October 26th and November 8th, the community voted. Another thing I want to mention about AB 465 is the involvement of community and stakeholders, which we are very excited about. We try to have the community engaged as much as possible. And again, given that it was the first round, we were very excited to see the total number of nominated sites that we received. The voting period for the top sites concluded as of November 15th, and those were announced on our website. And then between now and about spring of this year, we will be finalizing host site negotiations with those 2 sites that were selected and voted by the community, and ultimately file with the commission a request to approve us moving forward with constructing these CBSRs in Northern Nevada and in Southern Nevada, with the ultimate goal of having these 2 sites completed by Q1 of 2023. So just to give you a little bit more of information on those sites that were shortlisted, you can see here in Southern Nevada, we had a few community locations, which were very exciting. We had Freedom Park, Lorenzi Park, the Latin Chamber of Commerce, Mountaintop Faith Ministries, New Woo Art Center, and the Howard Lieberman Senior Center. And for Northern Nevada, the shortlisted sites were the City of Reno, their Moana Center, Swope Middle School, and American Iron Gym and Barbell. As I mentioned, our customers were tasked with voting for these as required. And on November 15th, we ultimately published the 2 selected sites, which were Freedom Park for Southern Nevada and the Moana Center for Northern Nevada. I did want to at least provide an update on the existing CBSR that we have here in Southern Nevada, located at Mojave High School in North Las Vegas. This is the first CBSR that's part of ESAP, even though it was approved in docket number 20-07023 as a pilot project. The CBSR is a carport, as you can see here, that contains about 1,000 solar panels, and it generates at least 773 megawatt hours per year. We partner with the Clark County School District to enter into a 25-year lease for this project. And it's very important because this project directly interconnects to our distribution grid and supports customers that were selected to participate in ESAP. Not only that, but this drives the development for more clean energy. As has been mentioned, our customers are looking more towards, it brings environmental benefits, and it also provides economic benefits to Nevada. Bombard Electric was the primary contractor for Mojave Solar, and they also had a worksite agreement with the IBEW Local 357 and 396. and construction workers that were certified by our Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation Program were also employed, which I believe you'll have more information shortly here. And this project has been operational since December 21 of 2021. We're very excited about it. It looks great. Like I mentioned, I have this picture here, but we certainly have more pictures to share if requested. Now our next steps. So we do have a few things coming up shortly. Like I mentioned briefly, we do have an information report that is due March 1 of this year and every year on the recent ESAP program. So we have to provide an information on the total number of customers, how many applications we received, in future timeframes, any customers who left the program voluntarily, because the only way for a customer to leave ESAP is for them to voluntarily request it. That's one thing I'd like to mention is any customer who was deemed eligible and accepted to ESAP is in the program from January 1 through December 31, regardless of whether certain circumstances occurred during that year that may no longer make them eligible for the future year. So we're actually working on preparing that information now to file March 1. We also have a recovery of assets request due March 1 of 2022. Here, we're going to request approval to recover the incremental spend that went into implementing ESAP, as well as other ESAP items such as the Mojave CBSR information. And then, as I mentioned a little bit in my CBSR timeline slide, we do have an ESAP plan amendment that we expect to file in spring of 2022, where we're going to request approval of the 2 CBSR sites that were selected by the community, which are Freedom Park and the Moana Center, in addition to any other items that we feel will better the implementation of the second round of ESAP for really this year and any years moving forward. So that seems to be the end of my presentation. As I mentioned, my name is Cynthia Almeida. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I can be reached at this phone number here or email. So I look forward to any questions anyone may have.
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
There we go. Okay, just having some computer issues. Any questions before we move on to the second part of this presentation? No? Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Alejandre, for the presentation. I appreciate it. I have a couple of questions. First, I'd just like to go back to the application figures. So, it looks like, as you said, there was the most interest in the low income eligible customer category. But in general, it looks like the applications and approvals came in well below the dedicated capacity. So I was just wondering, I guess I have a few questions about that. So you mentioned some of the marketing efforts that were undertaken, and I was wondering if you have a plan to survey some of those who signed up to see what worked, what didn't, and if we could just get a better sense of how does the process work to get more people into these different dedicated areas?
So I believe we will be having a survey of some sort where we ask these particular customers. We're still working on that. We did see most of the spike in applications when we conducted direct email. So that's certainly something that we're working with our corporate communications team, our director, our customer operations team as well, to figure out how to maybe make that a more directed effort, since we did see a lot more interest once we sent that out. We're also working with our agency, our external agency, to fine tune and determine, now that we've seen this first round, what worked, what didn't work, how can we make it better. so that we are in the process of determining how to do that. I think it's important to note that it is the first year of the program and it is meant to grow. That capacity is the total capacity for the program. It's not an annual capacity that increases every year by that same amount. So we are very motivated to increase that number, but at the same time understand that it was the first program, the first run, and as people start talking about it, sharing with their families, sharing with their friends, I think we will be seeing a spike of interest in these categories. I also want to highlight that for the disadvantaged business and nonprofit organizations, that 10,000 kilowatt hour cap did limit the number of those type of customers that could qualify for that category. So we did see applicants that exceeded that 10,000 megawatt or kilowatt hour per month consumption that ultimately made them ineligible for this program. So it really, I think it's a learning experience, and we're certainly looking at our marketing efforts and how to improve those. We also were excited to see a lot of this information in our various local government officials' newsletters. I know that was shared a lot as well. So I think at this point, it's trying to figure out what worked, what didn't work, and how can we improve upon that, with the understanding that our customers maybe had other things going on during the summer. And I only bring this up because I know Northern Nevada, there were a lot of other external factors that maybe took more of our customers' attention. Maybe they didn't see some of the social media or didn't pay particular attention to it. So we are trying to figure out if we're able to get out in the community in person. There were several events in Northern Nevada that we were not able to make due to them being canceled. So we're currently working again with our corporate communications team right now to figure out what events are coming. What can we do? Can we be there in person? We did have a lot of virtual events where we presented this information, but we do think that having a more of an in-person connection where we are able to walk a customer through the application, let them know exactly what we're looking for, that is probably the best way to actually get those applications in our hands.
Thank you very much for that additional information. And yeah, I certainly appreciate that, you know, you were getting the program stood up and approved, and then had to quickly put the application out there, and definitely appreciate the fact that word of mouth will help, and that, you know, wildfires and the pandemic that it seems to always put a crimp on our plans for in-person events, certainly have posed their own challenges. Could you, and you know, I also have to applaud you with a simple process. Both of my parents actually applied for and were approved for ESAP in 2 different categories. So
oh, great. That makes me happy to hear.
Yeah. So, and I definitely did try and get the word out as well. So the other question that I had was just around the guaranteed lower rate for the low income eligible customers. Could you just give us a little bit more information on that, kind of how that's determined, you know, and any factors in that, and, you know, if you've got it, what that lower rate is?
Yes, and I'm trying to find my document here. Otherwise, I will make sure to provide you directly with the information. I want to make sure I don't misspeak, but I know that our we're essentially called the ESAP rider is still with the commission to get finalized Asian and get it approved. But the way that it works, without getting too technical, and I'm more than happy to follow up with anyone if we want to get into a deeper dive with the rates and the calculation. Make sure I have a rates team member to go through that whole process. But as AB 465 provides for in the regulations, the ESAP rate is a component of our deferred energy adjustment accounting number and our base tariff energy rate. So what the ESAP rate will look like is going to be the 70% of that portion and 30% of the utility scale and the CBSR costs, for lack of a better word. So right now what we filed, and I'll provide the information for Nevada Power, is the residential expanded solar energy rider or rate is at, and I'll give you the number so that you can write it down if you'd like. It's $0.04717, and that would be for the eligible premise category customer. Now, what I want to be clear though is that that number that I gave you, the 4717, isn't going to replace the rate. Rather, what customers will see on their bill is a credit. So for example, if the current BTER and DEA rate you're paying is 60 and you're under the ESAP program and it's the 4717, you will see a credit for that difference. So your consumption will be multiplied by that difference, and that will ultimately provide you with that credit. So right now what we're seeing is that everyone in ESAP will be receiving a reduction. The only difference is that the low income discount is guaranteed to be lower, even if other categories were to be more expensive based on quarterly updates or once costs from these CBSRs start to be part of it. Again, I'm certainly not the expert or subject matter expert on our rates, and I can certainly get with anyone at a later time if requested and if desired with our rates team that can provide you much more of a deeper dive as to how that works.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And the big picture is helpful. I was just trying to understand the different factors in terms of the large scale resources, the community-based resources, if how the pool of approved customers may factor in there. So that's extremely helpful. And Madam Chair, if I may have one more question. Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the community-based sites. So in your presentation, I believe you noted that there were at least 3 and no more than 10 potential sites. And so it seems like between Mojave and the other 2 that are kind of going through the approval process, that's the 3. And so I was just wondering if there's anything you can share about kind of the timeline or consideration for potential additional community-based sites to be considered.
Yes, absolutely. And so the minimum of 3, no more than 10 is for each service territory. So in Southern Nevada, assuming that host site negotiations are successful with City of Las Vegas and we get an approval to move forward with that CBSR, that will be 2 in Southern Nevada. And of course, Moana Center in Reno will be the first one in Northern Nevada. Given that this was the first time, again, we wanted to make sure that we understood what the process would look like, what type of nominations we would receive, given that we did receive a substantial number of nominations that were, again, I was very excited to see that number. We do feel confident that as this program keeps growing and more information keeps being provided more year round than just a month. As I mentioned, we launched the nomination period on August 2nd, which is the same time that marketing launched, because you only had about a month to get everything implemented or at least ready to get that going as of August 2nd. So now that we have more time to promote it, we do think we'll see more of these nominations come in this next round. So the dates remain the same. We expect to launch the nomination period the same time frame as we did last year. We're hoping that with marketing much more in advance, that we'll get more of these nominated sites, but the timeline will essentially remain the same. Now, we did move forward with just 1 location in each service territory because we were conscious of the number of applicants we were receiving. These costs ultimately will be recovered, and so we want to ensure that we're not possibly impacting that rate by adding more CBSRs at once, then possibly spreading them out as customer enrollment also increases. So as far as timeline and what that looks like, again, we're going to launch the nomination period this year at the same time. We hope to have marketing much more in advance so that people are more aware. I know that some of the sites that were shortlisted but not voted on have expressed interest in doing it again. So I do think that we'll be seeing a lot more interest this go around. And based on that, the number that is shortlisted might increase. Again, we'll also be in the process of our customer enrollment period. So we'll be able to gauge what that looks like. The last thing we want to do is, implement 5 at once. That could ultimately impact the ESAP rate for our ESAP customers.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alejandre, for all that additional information. I appreciate it. And again, completely appreciate the idea that, now that the program is stood up, the marketing is kind of an ongoing process, and it's helpful to understand kind of the phased nature of the applications, both for customers and for the community-based sites. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the indulgence of all the questions.
Thank you, Assemblyman.
Thank you. Assemblyman Ellison, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Watts hit most of that stuff, so I appreciate that, and I'll send my questions over on email. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the second portion, and we'll have Dieter join us to talk about the workforce development component of this program.
Hi, this is Elisa Caffaretta. I'm the director of the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. We're very excited to be a part of this project. I'm joined this morning by Chris Sewell, who's our deputy director, and Carlene Johnson, who's our deputy administrator on the workforce side. We're just the cheering section this morning because we're excited about it, but here to answer questions if they come up. Our involvement with this project is going to be presented by Roberta Tapia, who is the program specialist. So I'll turn it over to her, and we have a presentation that we'll share.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. For the record, I am Roberta Tapia. I am a program specialist at the Department of Employment, Training and Rehabilitation, or DETR. The division is the Employment Security Division, and I work for the Workforce Investment Support Services Unit. This presentation seeks to provide an overview of DETR's role in the Expanded Solar Access Program, or ESAP. ESAP directed DETR to create a workforce development plan to establish the Solar Workforce Innovations and Opportunities Program. And you will see the acronym throughout the presentation, but I'll try my best to spell it out. It's SWIO in the presentation. Next. This workforce plan was created in collaboration with representatives from the IBW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 357, 396, and 401. The group also included the Electrical Joint Apprenticeship Training Center in Southern Nevada, and in Northern Nevada, the Northern Nevada Electrical Training Center, and members represented NV Energy as well. Next. Meetings began the first week of September 2020 and resulted in establishing the position titles, pay, minimum qualifications with variations between the regions. In the South, the job classification would be that of solar panel installer, whereas in the North, the construction wireman classification would be used as the entry-level pre-apprenticeship position that would provide exposure and experience to program participants. The application process is detailed in the prospective training center websites and can include applications, transcripts, assessments, and interviews. Leader programs and services to assist candidates include job matching, workshops, assessments, and referrals to supportive services as appropriate. The Career Enhancement Program, or CEP, provides funding for short-term training and work-related items necessary to begin work. As we met, we also identified possible career paths such as telecommunications, wireman, residential, or outside lineman. Throughout the meetings, the union also confirmed that participation in this program would provide valuable experience that would be considered when applications were made for apprenticeships. The working relationships have expanded beyond the Solar Workforce Innovations and Opportunities program and have resulted in job orders for positions in Wadsworth, Battle Mountain, and Fish Springs. Next. So, summary of the actual program. It provides for the development of the Solar Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Program, SWIO, including a workforce plan that lays the groundwork to introduce Nevadans from low-income communities to employment opportunities in solar installation occupations by providing information, training, and job placement. This is accomplished through the use of pre-apprenticeship entry-level positions with a recruitment focus on underserved, underrepresented, and low-income members of the community. For recruitment, it was determined that notification of new projects by NV Energy would alert leader to develop a customized recruitment plan along with the IBEW and the Joint Apprenticeship Training Centers. The recruitment program would be tailored to meet the project's specific number of candidates needed and deadlines. The outreach would consist of utilizing options such as social media, radio, and television, and directly communicating with community resources such as Nevada Partners, Hope for Prisoners, veteran organizations, and faith-based organizations. Referral candidates were made to Nevada Job Connect offices, which are traditionally located in diverse low-income communities. Employment representatives screen utilizing the skills, knowledge, and abilities identified by the IBEW through a review of the candidate's work history, resumes, and assessments to ensure the referral was appropriate. During the evaluation interview, staff explained potential apprenticeship opportunities, the minimum qualifications, and review position descriptions to provide a realistic view of what the position involves. One of the requirements for the positions is an OSHA 10 certification, and this training would be funded through the Career Enhancement Program. As far as the titles, compensation, and benefits, that information was provided by the union. In the South, the Local 357 chose to use the solar panel installer position, and in the North, Local 401 used the construction wireman position. Benefits include full medical and pension. The plan also provides for reporting of aggregate workforce statistics that is due to NV Energy this month. Next. So we did put the plan in action with the first project of Mojave High School. It was approved in December 2020. Requests for proposal bids were due March 2021, and a selection was made in April of 2021. And NV Energy briefly reported on this as well. The request for proposal did require the bidder to participate in the program, in the Solar Workforce Innovations Opportunity Program. by including at least one employee per 5 and assuring that at least 50% are Nevada residents. This project, as previously explained, called for the installation of solar panels on a newly constructed car parking structure with an anticipated need of 15 total solar panel instructors. And the contractor selected was Bombard Electric. For communication, Dieter collaborated with the IBEW local business manager to determine the referral process and minimum qualifications. Dieter created a job order with the input provided. The selected candidates in need of the OSHA 10 certification were enrolled in the Career Enhancement Program, scheduled for training, and provided payment to the training provider for the course. With the training complete, the candidates' names, applications, and copies of the OSHA 10 certification were forwarded to the local IBEW, and names were provided to their dispatcher. The positions that were utilized were 3, based on the need for 15 installers and using the 1-to-5 ratio. Bombard did commit to the 3 positions, and they would have taken a 4th candidate. However, that candidate declined the opportunity prior to beginning the position. The benefits, again, did include paid health insurance and pension. Next slide, thank you. This slide shows the flyer announcing the career opportunity, identified the zip codes considered, and provided instructions on how to apply. It was posted on Facebook and on Twitter. It was also distributed to Nevada Partners and Hope for Prisoners. Next. Dieter Job Connect received 13 inquiries. 6 were qualified on the minimum requirements and resided in the designated zip codes. The 7 remaining applicants did not reside in the zip code areas and were contacted by phone and email to determine further interest should a project come to their area. Of the 6 that met the initial qualifications, 2 did not respond to follow-up inquiries. The remaining 4 candidates met the requirements, including an interest in the apprenticeship program and self-attested to having good math skills. While this was not a requirement for the entry-level pre-apprenticeship solar panel installer position, it would later be a requirement for an apprenticeship and would be further assessed at the appropriate time. The union application was sent to all 4. However, 1 did not start the project. That left 3 applicants. One of the 3 applicants already had the OSHA 10 certificate. The other 2 were enrolled in the Career Enhancement Program, scheduled and completed the training September 4th and 5th. All were high school graduates, and prior positions held included landscaping, handyman, driver, and concrete laborer. And all those positions were at lower pay than the solar panel installer. Next. Onboarding began by having the candidates report to the union to complete personnel forms, which included membership in the union, benefit, and pension forms. The 3 participants reported for a 1-day safety orientation at Bombard Electric and reported to the job site the next day. We received weekly progress reports from Bombard with attendance records and general project updates. Next. The end of the project happened sooner than anticipated. It was a shorter duration than anticipated based on the draft timeline provided. Originally, it was to be 10 weeks for the solar installation to be completed, which was accomplished in 5 weeks. And as part of follow-up, we did reach out to the remaining candidates to try and assess their interest in apprenticeship. We were only able to contact one of the three, and he is on the books for other projects, but has moved on to other positions in the meantime. Next. This slide shows an item from the governor's newsletters of November 11th, 2021. The gentleman in the neon green t-shirt and the one with the neon green vest and a hard hat are two of the three participants. Next. Considerations before the next project include planning for gaps in candidates' participation. There were some gaps during this project as the contractor was waiting for materials. What we can do with those gaps would include having participants return to a Job Connect office to receive additional services. That could be the provision of employment services such as conducting assessments before the apprenticeship applications, providing mock interview practices, and assisting with any resumes. We have made contact with the union representative, and once the next request for proposal goes out for the Freedom Park project, we will begin meeting again. This is set for spring of this year. Next. And that concludes my presentation. My contact information is there on the screen. If you should have further questions or need for information. Otherwise, I'm ready to accept questions at this time.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the information. It was really exciting to watch that first project go up and hear feedback from the students and staff at the high school, realizing, I don't think they realized how truly important it was for the surrounding community. So thank you so much for the presentation. Members, any questions for Dieter about the program? Wow, you're getting off easy. I don't see any raised hands. So thank you again. And we look to continue the work and provide even more job opportunities as this program grows throughout the state. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. With that, we will close item number 5, and we will move on to item number 6. As you all know, energy is a hot topic during the 2021 legislative session and will be again in 2023. The bills passed during the session continue to examine the energy needs of the citizens of Nevada. In particular, SB 448 made various changes to energy regulations, policies, and programs. Some provisions in the bill require the PUCN to open a rulemaking or an investigatory docket. Today, we will hear the status of those dockets and welcome back the PUCN.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Ms. Mullen, oh, perfect. Just making sure we have the presentation up. All right, well, for the record, I'm Garrett Weir, General Counsel for the Public Utilities Commission. And I will try to be brief in providing an update of the Commission's implementation of Senate Bill 448 from last session. As you, I'm sure, are aware, that's the omnibus energy bill sponsored by Senator Brooks that includes various components. Among the provisions in that bill are requirements related to transportation electrification, transmission planning. There are some other resource planning provisions that I will address as well. And then a reopening of the Economic Development Electric Rate Rider, discussion of a process for facilitating the state's entrance into a regional transmission organization. And there are a few other miscellaneous clarifications and revisions as well. So with regard to transportation electrification, the bill breaks that policy into kind of two components. You have a requirement for an initial upfront transportation electrification plan, or a plan to accelerate transportation electrification in Nevada. That's section 49 of the bill, that required NV Energy to file a plan by September 1st, 2021. And that upfront requirement was a fast-tracked process. The commission was required to review and decide on that plan within 90 days. And it is pretty prescriptive as to what the bill is prescriptive as to what is included in that plan, the types of projects, and the dollar amounts. It explicitly limits or identifies the dollar amount to not exceed $100 million. And the particular kinds of projects addressed in that plan include an interstate corridor charging program, an urban charging depot program, a public agency electric vehicle charging program, transit, school bus, and transportation electrification custom program, and finally an outdoor recreation and tourism program. And so on November 30th, 2021, the commission issued an order modifying and accepting NV Energy's proposed plan that contained all of those components, and the commission found that the modified plan checked all the boxes required by the legislation. On actually yesterday, the commission at an open meeting did reaffirm its order with regard to a couple of requests for reconsideration that had been filed. But as a result, we now know what the final order and version of the modified plan is going to look like. So that's the upfront component of transportation electrification that is required by SB 448. The other requirements related to transportation electrification are outlined in sections 14 and 40 of the bill, and they require ongoing incorporation of transportation electrification planning into the triennial integrated resource planning process that the commission undertakes. And the rulemaking that is addressing this requirement to incorporate a transportation electrification plan into the distributed resource planning component of the IRP, the integrated resource plan. That rulemaking is PUCN docket number 21-06036. And the current status of that rulemaking is that the commission requested comments and on some proposed draft language. It received those comments on December 23rd, 2021. And then there were responsive comments and other language proposals provided on January 6th, 2022. And then now the next phase will be it may be actually occurring right now. The commission is holding a workshop today to address that language. So next slide. All right, so that was pretty much everything. Just a brief summary of the transportation electrification component of the bill. The next component is transmission planning. And as, bear with me for a moment. As you recall, the transmission planning component required that NV Energy file an amendment to its pending integrated resource plan application to include a proposal for certain specified projects, high voltage transmission projects that the commission had previously found prudent for the utilities to move forward with conceptual designs, permitting, and land acquisition for. So essentially it was the remaining projects associated with the Greenlink transmission project that I know you're all very aware of. So that plan was incorporated into the resource plan application as an amendment, and was carved out as a separate phase of the resource planning proceeding that's pending before the commission as phase 4. So that's the final phase of the resource plan proceedings before the commission. Intervenor testimony was actually due yesterday. However, and my notes on the slides before you don't reflect this, but last week the commission received a consensus stipulation settling all of the issues that were presented. And so it's very unlikely that we will actually see a hearing and further testimony in this matter. And I think you can expect to see that stipulation be brought to the PUC at an upcoming agenda and public meeting for the commission to vote on. So, you know, that given the fact that the utility met according to the signatories to the stipulation, satisfied the requirements of SB 448 with regard to that transmission infrastructure for a clean energy economy plan. No one is contesting the terms of the stipulation. And so that will potentially be resolved within the next, by the end of the month. So next slide. So some of the other resource planning requirements that are addressed by SB 448 are a requirement that at least 10% of the expenditures related to energy efficiency measures focus on low income households and residents and customers in historically underserved communities. So that requirement has been incorporated into the planning process for the commission, and there's proposed language again in the rulemaking proceeding that I referenced previously. It's also addressing this matter. All resource planning issues related to SB 448 are being addressed in that docket 21-06036, and that is currently, I believe there's a workshop occurring as we speak. So the other requirement, other resource planning requirement, is that the utilities be required to include in their plan a scenario that would achieve 0 carbon emissions by 2050, and then another scenario that would achieve an 80% reduction compared to 2005 levels by 2030. So again, those scenarios contemplating what it would look like to get to those carbon emission reduction goals, that's a new statutory requirement that ensures a review of planning decisions that would be necessary to reach those outcomes. And then, yeah, I guess next slide, thank you. So the economic development electric rate rider provisions within SB 448 would extend the availability of the discounted electric rates for new commercial or industrial businesses in Nevada. The rulemaking that the commission has initiated to implement those new requirements is in docket number 21-06037. So the proceedings in that rulemaking have included comments and draft language being due on July 30th. The PUC held an informal workshop, not the workshop required by the Administrative Procedure Act, but one to help to facilitate discussion and address some of the draft language. That was held on August 10th. Then on August 13th, 2021, the commission sent the proposed regulation to LCB for pre-adoption review. It has since had the proposed regulation returned by LCB in revised form. And on December 2nd, 2021, the PUC concluded that the revised proposed regulation would not be likely to impose a direct or significant economic burden upon small businesses, And then actually I have an update now that isn't on the slide, which is that the required workshop and hearing under the Nevada Administrative Procedure Act, that workshop and hearing have been scheduled for February 14th and 16th respectively. So those will be following that workshop and hearing. The commission can then proceed to adoption of a regulation. So next page. So with regard to the regional transmission organization components of the bill, I know you're going to hear about RTOs and regionalization during a later presentation from NV Energy. So I'll focus just on the component that explicitly required action from the commission for implementation, and that's being addressed in PUC docket number 21-06038. And it addresses basically the off-ramp provision within the bill through which if a utility demonstrates that despite all reasonable efforts being made to comply with the requirement to join an RTO by 2030, that it is unable to find a viable option, and that it is in the best interests of both the transmission provider and its customers, or rather not in its best interest to join on or before January 1st, 2030, the transmission provider may request that the PUC waive that requirement to join by the 1st of 2030. So the commission is going to be adopting a regulation that outlines the framework for evaluating such a request to off-ramp from that requirement. So next slide. Okay, so these are additional provisions that I'll briefly outline that they don't require new regulations by the commission, but they will affect utility operations and PUC decision-making. So the first of these additional provisions is related to net energy metering in section 36, and it provides some guidance regarding the definition of public utility to exempt from that definition owners of net metering systems that deliver electricity to multiple master metered persons, units, or spaces. So that helps to provide guidance to both the utility and its administration of the net metering programs, and also to the commission in determining eligibility for that program. So the burden of proof in utility rate cases, that's something that you might recall there was some discussion of last session. Basically, this is not something that is going to change the way that the commission has been recently reviewing rate cases and considering those applications. However, it will provide clarity to the utility applicants that there's no presumption that any of its expenses or investments included in the application were prudently incurred. It clarifies what that burden of proof is for the utility, and will hopefully ensure that the utility is fully aware of what needs to be included in applications moving forward. So the next item, next additional provision is related to the disposal of generation assets. This is kind of a rarely referenced statutory provision, but it will become relevant if Sierra Pacific Power Company and Nevada Power Company do seek to merge into a single utility in the future. And the commission will basically go through the process of evaluating such a proposal under a public interest standard, rather than there being a procedural barrier to that change in ownership of generation assets, compared to the law that existed prior to this bill. So next page. Oh, I think that's it. So yeah, with that, I've tried to be as fast as possible in providing a rundown of where things stand with the implementation of SB 448, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate making it short, a lot of information in a few short slides. Members, any questions? Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a comment. There's a lot in that bill, and almost all of it affected the Public Utilities Commission and created quite a bit of work. And I see there's several open dockets and have been tracking them. And just wanted to thank the Commission for just their efficient handling of the things that were in that Senate bill through the whole docket process and everything that we have going on. Just I wanted to thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Members, any other questions or comments? Are you guys all awake? Okay, all right, there we go. Well, it looks like you're getting off easy. Thank you so much for presenting not once, but twice today. We truly appreciate it and sharing the information. All right, with that, we will move on to our next agenda item. It's agenda item number 7. And we'll hear presentations on the regional energy markets. As many of you know, this is not a new topic for those members who have participated in energy issues in the past. Throughout the years, Western states have explored the creation of a Western regional energy market. This session, we passed SB 448, which created the Regional Transmission Coordination Task Force. The task force, chaired by Senator Brooks, is charged with advising the legislature and the governor on topics and policies related to regional energy transmission in the Western states. It will study the cost and benefits of transmission providers in Nevada joining a regional transmission organization to provide access to a wholesale electricity market. The presentations this morning will provide some fundamentals of the regional energy markets for the newer members of the committee and serve as a review for other committee members. I'm going to take the presentation a little bit out of order, and instead of starting with item A on your agenda, we are going to start with item C on the agenda. And there will be a presentation by NV Energy, who will be presenting. I believe it's going to be Ms. Carolyn Barbash and a few others. If you are on from NV Energy, you're welcome to get started. And welcome to our first GNI Interim Committee meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me and committee members?
I can hear you.
Great. I am Carolyn Barbash. I am the Vice President of Transmission Development and Policy at NV Energy. And today I've got 2 of my colleagues here, Ryan Atkins, our Director of Resource Optimization, and David Rubin, who is our Director of FERC Regulatory Affairs. And they both are going to be taking different parts of this. David's going to be available for just for Q&A at the end. So in my job, I'm responsible for the Greenlink projects. You'll hear a little bit about that today if I have time, and also some wholesale market development. Ryan Atkins in his resource optimization job is directly involved in the operates that we market in today and investigating single, adding on, other efforts that are looking at pieces of a whole market. And in my role, when I'm not trying to get Greenlink built or designed, or I get involved in wholesale market efforts that would eventually end up with us having all components of an energy market by one market operator and have it be a regional market. Is there a slide deck up being shared, or do you want me to do that? I can do that.
If you could do that, that would be great.
Sure. Let me get my files up here. I apologize, I thought. 2 seconds. Okay, now I just need to share my screen. So used to Teams, I've been doing that, so I need to.
No worries.
Figure this out here. I am really, I'd rather use my hand, my time getting Q&A. Share screen, got it. And now I need to make sure. Okay, does everyone see that? Great. Okay, so the topics we'll cover today are, and I apologize for some of you, as Chair Moreno said, some of this will be a review, some of it will be brand new, and some of it will be a reminder, especially for those of you who are, new to the committee or the legislature, or just have enough of a life that you don't go home and read journals, trade journals about wholesale markets. and then since Garrett from the PUC did such a good job, I'll just flip up some slides on 448. And then Ryan Atkins will go into, like I said, some of the markets that we operate in today, or that we are involved in reviewing some other single attribute of a full wholesale market. And I will go into some future things that we're working on to try to get the state of Nevada into a regional wholesale market with all the bells and whistles and services. And if I have time, I'll talk about where we're at on the Greenlink projects and why we're building them and what they do, just in case somebody here isn't familiar with those, because they're very important to a regional market and having it function properly. So with that, there's often a thought that Nevada's not in a market. We're not in a wholesale market. Well, we are. We participate in bilateral markets, meaning we go out and we find a seller of energy or a buyer of our energy, and we make a deal and set the price. And usually it's under a standard regulatory approved contract, and we buy that resource. And then we also more recently joined the EIM, which Ryan will speak to, which makes up in real time some of those imbalances where we forecast our load and the actual load's always different from that. Or if a generator isn't producing as much as we projected it to for us, it'll go find the energy for us. Or if we're producing more, it will sell it in that real-time market. With a clearing price, buyers and sellers brought together sort of like a stock exchange, but it's a very, very small piece of an electric market. An organized market does that. And that is more like a stock exchange rather than an over-the-counter market. It brings buyers and sellers together, sets a clearing price. It's much more liquid, more efficient. It's able to optimize resources better and clear congestion on the highways, which are transmission paths. So they're much more. They provide a lot of benefits, a lot of savings to customers, and a lot of other things. They present a little more risk in that they, We don't know the party sometimes who is carrying that energy, the exact path it's taking to get to us. We can't point to that brick and mortar resource, although there is one, but we don't know which one it is. And they're often more financially firm products, meaning if the product doesn't show up, you might have some load problems, but your customers get compensated for not having that energy. Bilateral markets exist in organized markets, meaning mostly utilities like us go out and secure a long-term resource or our resources to serve our base load, and then enter the organized market to optimize those resources in a shorter horizon, in the real time, minute to minute, or in the day ahead. So I think that's sort of, that's the market piece. RTOs do a lot more than that. They build transmission. They have resource adequacy requirements to ensure reliabilities. And there's a lot of other things involved in a full RTO, wholesale market, ISO. Those terms can be used interchangeably. The map there just shows areas of our country that have full operating energy markets with all those attributes I just talked about. And again, I won't go through this too much. Others will probably cover this later. They're all bid-based. They provide energy services, real-time, day-ahead, and ancillary services, which are sort of the products that help make the product get delivered reliably, keep the frequency and the voltage where they need to be. It's a lot more complicated than a stock exchange because you're not just matching up buyers and sellers. You have to worry about all this other weird electricity stuff too. And there's clearing congestion, which is, maybe ramping up a generator in one location and ramping down in another location because your highway's full. So they all use a locational marginal pricing to set that price so that it indicates the price of having to do everything you have to do to get the energy to that location. They're all approved by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And like I said, they include regional transmission planning and development and requirements to ensure that each user, all the users in the market, meaning the utilities that serve their customers, have adequate resources every day, every minute, and even in the long term. Just to remind you all, Garrett did a wonderful job on this. It's section 30 that talks about the regional transmission organization requirements, and that transmission providers in Nevada, and the energy as utility being one of those and probably the largest with the most assets, are required to belong to a regional transmission organization by 2030, unless the waiver is filed not good for customers, can't find the right partners, can't get a regional scope, or it's not in the public interest, meaning the cost outweighs the benefit, something like that, or it compromises Nevada's clean energy goals, something like that. That would be probably cause to file a waiver for a delay in getting there. The state of Nevada has a definition in SB 448 for what a RTO means to them. And it's all good stuff. It differs a bit from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's definition of what they approve as an RTO, but that all meets the same intent. And we've got some great stuff in here, meaning, we can't sacrifice our reliability to be in an RTO. Most of Nevada's customers are in Las Vegas, which is fortunately very recently built and has very good reliability, top 10 percentile. So we wouldn't want to compromise that. No advantages to any particular customer, so there's no cheating. There should be lower prices and reliable clean energy, and there should be good, planning infrastructure around this RTO. That red piece there, the governance structure or control that is an independent of users of the facilities, that is highlighted because I think that's important to NV Energy and it's important to Nevada in that there is only one organized market, and it's very close to us. It's in California. That that organized market, it's controlled by a governance board that is appointed by the governor of California. And they approve every market rule, every decision about how expensive transmission projects will be allocated to customers. And Nevada's not represented on that adequately right now. So it's just not available to join without some changes. There's a lot of good things about the California ISO. They've successfully operated the regional energy imbalance market and a very good operations. But right now, joining the full contingent of the full participating RTO really is a little, we're not able to do that as it is. We also have a task force set up in Nevada, you know, and that task force is, I went too far, is really going to analyze and report back to the governor and the legislature on what it might cost, what our customers in Nevada might get in return, what laws might need to be changed, how we can increase economic development through belonging to a wholesale market, you know, more availability of low carbon energy and things like that, that attracts people to Nevada, more renewable generation coming here. And the first report from that committee is due November 30th of 2022, and then it will be on an every other year basis after that. This is the members that have been appointed. Senator Brooks will chair the committee as a sponsor of SB 448, which will be someone very knowledgeable to lead that group. And I believe all the members here are populated except 2 members of the Senate and 2 members of the State Assembly. They're not currently on that list. If they have been selected, they're not yet there. This slide's outdated, sorry. And now, finally, I've covered some of the basics about where we're at in this wholesale market, why we're trying to do it. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ryan Atkins, to talk about the markets that we do operate in and some of the other pieces of a market that we're looking at under various initiatives in the West. Ryan?
Good morning. Let me get my presentation up.
You want me to keep flipping through this one? You can just say next slide.
Sure, that works. We can do that.
All right.
All right. So I am Ryan Atkins. I'm the Director of Trading, Analytics, and Operations here at NV Energy. So I oversee our group that buys and sells our electricity, our natural gas, and schedules all of our resources. So I'm going to talk about the market options that are currently in place, as well as some of the other discussions that are ongoing. And I think what you're going to see and hear are that there are a lot of options being talked about. And what's important is that NV Energy and other entities in the West are looking for a long-term solution. And we'll see if that's through smaller incremental steps or going right into a full-scale market. But I think really the discussion starts with the Western Energy Imbalance Market, or the EIM. And the EIM is a real-time energy market operated by the California ISO. It was launched back in 2014. NV Energy joined in 2015 as the 3rd participant. Now the EIM is a true imbalance market, and it's optimized at the 5-minute level. It's important to note, so this is a voluntary market, and participating is not equivalent to being a full member of the CAISO. So the transmission control, the resource adequacy, the resource planning, that remains with the member utilities. And as you can see on the slide, there's the continued growth and expansion of the EIM. By next year, there will be 22 active participants, representing 84% of the demand in the Western US. And with this huge geographic footprint, that just means bigger benefits both economically and reliability for us. Next slide, Carolyn. And so just looking at the benefits for NV Energy since joining the EIM through Q3 of 2021, benefits exceeded $151 million. And on the next slide, it just shows all entities throughout the history of the EIM, cumulative benefits have exceeded $1.7 billion. Next slide, please. So from the CAISO's perspective, the next incremental step is really this extended day-ahead market, or EDAM as it's called. This is really just expanding the concept of the EIM to a day-ahead time frame. This would be more of an incremental step on the way to a full-scale market. It would remain voluntary, similar to EIM, and would not be equivalent to becoming a full member of the CAISO. It would allow current EIM members to leverage a lot of the work that they've done with their systems from signing up with EIM, and participating in CAISO in the day-ahead timeframe would allow for additional fuel and purchase power savings and just continued integration of renewable resources. So this effort was really kicked back off in late 2021 and will continue through this year. At this time, no determination has been made as to whether NV Energy will participate. If you go to the next slide, just again, highlighting this timeline. So this policy design discussions will be going on through this year. And then in theory, implementation in 2023 and potential participation in 2024. So that's one of these incremental options that we're talking about. On the next slide, so this is a bit of a new wrinkle that's come into play, a new unique kind of market option, a Western Resource Adequacy Program, the WRAP as they call it, from the Northwest Power Pool. So rather than being a real-time or day-ahead market designed for optimization, this is really focused on capacity sharing and ensuring resource adequacy for its entities, its members. So it's going to match up a resource deficient member and pair them with somebody else who may have a little bit of excess. So it's more focused on the reliability piece and less on the real-time optimization piece that we've been talking through with EIM and potentially EDAM. There is a lot of participation in this program already. It would be another incremental step towards greater regional coordination and a potential long-term market solution. Currently, the program has retained SPP as the program operator, and they're preparing a non-binding test of requirements for this summer and upcoming winter. They anticipate being fully up and running by 2024. And NV Energy is participating in the current phase to be able to determine the long-term feasibility and benefits of this program. And if you look at the next slide, the map, it just shows, similar to EIM, just this large footprint across the West and this regional collaboration that's really going on with these market options. And then if you go forward 2 slides, Carolyn, another key initiative related to regional coordination is FERC Order 1000. And this requires the participation in regional transmission planning groups. So if you see on the map, NV Energy has been participating in West Connect, which is in the green. But we just received approval from FERC and the PUCN to join Northern Grid. And looking at the map, Northern Grid is going to be a combination of Columbia Grid in purple, the Northern Tier Transmission Group in yellow, and then the state of Nevada. So you're going to have one really large transmission planning group coming out of this. That's going to help with us, our improved ties to the north and the east to take advantage of GreenLink, which Carolyn will talk to in a little bit. And really the most important point is just that this is another step towards widespread transmission coordination rather than a more siloed approach to transmission planning. Now, looking at kind of these, what we call multi-attribute market initiatives, so I'd say greater than an incremental step like we've been talking about. The first thing that's come out is the Western Markets Exploratory Group. So this is a group of Western utilities announced back in October of 2021. Really, they've come together to talk and identify market solutions to achieve the goals that we've all been talking about: carbon reduction, reliability, affordable service, and really finding and developing a long-term solution for the entire West. And one important thing about this group is, they're really going to incorporate lessons learned from these existing markets, as well as these ongoing efforts across the West that I'm talking through. So the current process, or the current members are in the process of selecting a facilitator, and a project manager that has some experience to really start putting together a structure of what a new option could look like. As you can see on that table, quite a large list of large utilities that are a part of these discussions, including NV Energy. And again, this is just to really help identify and vet what are the options now and what else could exist going forward that would satisfy our needs. Next slide, Carolyn. So finally, I just want to talk about Southwest Power Pool and their potential expansion. So if you see on the map, SPP already has an RTO in the mid-continent, so in the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, into Texas, but they are expanding. They had launched their own Western Energy Imbalance Service, the WISE, in February of 2021. So this is similar to the EIM that we participate in, where members don't have to be a full participant of SPP, and it's managing them on a sub-hourly level. There are numerous participants already that are in the mostly Colorado and Wyoming area. And then there's the potential of that expanding into a full SPP RTO West in 2024. So that would have SPP really starting to get into the Western region. SPP is also offering what they call a Markets Plus concept. So it would combine this real-time functionality with day-ahead functionality, but wouldn't require participants to go all the way into signing up for a full RTO membership. So they're trying to come up with some unique options that entities may be interested in. And yeah, so you can just see kind of on the right with the Markets Plus, it's a bit of a hybrid between current path, a full RTO, and what they're offering. And then, so really, I think the key takeaway just of all these options that I've outlined, and I've tried to keep it very high level, is just that NV Energy and a lot of entities are really trying to look at all these options, keeping an open mind, but we can't do it alone, right? We all have an interest in finding the best solution. And I think it's going to be really critical to try and identify a single market solution. So if it ends up being multiple markets with multiple seams between those markets, it would lead to lesser economic and reliability benefits. So this really is a key time and the reason that there's so many options that are currently in play. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Carolyn, to talk through GreenLink.
Thanks, Ryan. So just an update on the GreenLink transmission project. Let me just kind of walk through what they are. And this transmission is extremely important to the topic of wholesale markets. Without that, without this transmission, we don't really have a robust interconnection with other states. These transmission projects are all within Nevada, but as you can see over here in this Ely area, we've got strong interconnections over here and a lot of development interest over here to our eastern states, some of the states that have a little bit more complementary resources to Nevada's large amount of solar, meaning wind and hydro. That the wind usually blows when the sun's not shining, often picks up in the eastern parts of the western states at night when the sun goes down. So it's very complementary, and hydro as well, because Nevada's not known for its large supply of water. So Greenlink West is about 350 miles long in total, about from Yerington down to the Las Vegas Valley at the Northwest substation is about 230 miles, and then over into the city of Las Vegas, through the city of Las Vegas to our Harry Allen substation, probably another 30, 35 miles. And then we have another part of Greenlink is Greenlink North, which is this line across, basically following Highway 50 across Nevada from Yerington over to the Ely area. About 250 miles of 500 kV line as well. And then we've got some things that we call the common ties, which pick up these two big, I like to think of these as big sources of supplying bulk energy. And it picks up that energy and steps it down to 345 kV, which used to be the largest voltage we had in Nevada, and delivers it into some of these large growing areas in the Tri-Center area. The Carson Valley released some reliability problems in the Carson and Mason valleys, and it also picks up a lot of renewables in those areas as well. Why are we building these, proposing to build these lines? One, for connectivity to other states, but just in a little bit more detail. This online, it was our first interconnection between the two utilities. Greenlink West, which the PUC has approved to be constructed from Fort Churchill down to the Northwest substation, and be in service by December 2026, will be the second, and it'll provide a backup to this. This provides a lot of optimizing, saves our customers a ton of money is what I should say. This online project that we built back in 2004, well, we had it in service in December 2013. But we really share a lot of resources between Northern and Southern Nevada. There's a great seasonal diversity in our loads, and there's a great difference in resources as well. So just the two ends of the state are very complementary in sharing those resources. If this line were to go out, it's out until it gets back in. If that's a wildfire, it's out until we can order poles in the supply chain, wire, whatever gets burnt down, and rebuild it. And we don't want to lose that money, all those savings we're passing on to customers right now. We also get suspended from the EIM market, which is a big energy saver. So this line will provide some redundancy, some really good reliability. It's also very strategically planned to run through very rich solar energy zones. There's 3 solar energy zones around there, probably some of the richest in the country. And those will be Nevada's to serve our customers with low cost energy, lots of interest from renewable developers around there, as well as provide the economic development to our state with new jobs, cleaner resources, add to our carbon goals. That area has no access to our grid right now, and so this project will open it up. It's also, I think I talked about most of it. It really, our major purpose for building it was to get energy into Northern Nevada and meet our Nevada's clean energy goals. But just the economic development that it provides on top is just really icing on the cake with these projects. So, and again, it'll position us as a leader. We're right centrally where what they need for the state of Nevada geographically needs to be part of a regional market. We connect all the complementary resources right through our state. We're right in the middle. We're the hole in the middle of the donut. And so it positions us to be a leader in the energy market. Greenlink North is going to create a total redundant triangle around the state, meaning, if you could lose any one of these 500 kV lines and still have delivery to the 2 points, to Las Vegas, to Ely, and to Yerington. And so it's building in some very much needed redundancy finally to the state of Nevada, and encouraging the business development. This line strategically was planned to follow some wind zones, some geothermal zones, and some additional solar zones. There's also a lot of pumped hydro interest out in Ely, Nevada, which is complementary to solar as well, because you can let the water flow at night like a hydro plant, and and it can pump it uphill while we have excess solar during the hot summer days down there in Clark County. We filed these 345 kV lines and this first phase of GreenLink West, like I say, are moving forward with construction. They're well into the EIS and NEPA permitting stages with the BLM. And we filed September 1st to include these in accordance with SB 448, the Northwest to Harry Allen and the GreenLink North line to be in service by December 2028. And as the PUCN representatives, Stephanie and Garrett said at the beginning of their presentations, that we filed that plan, and a stipulation is under review to approve inclusion of that GreenLink North project in the final phase of GreenLink West in those construction plans. And I will open it up for questions now. We also have David Rubin on here, who is very knowledgeable about federal regulatory requirements and just the history of wholesale markets in general, been involved in the creation of a lot of them. So that, Chair, I will open up to questions for the committee.
Perfect. Thank you both for that presentation. I believe first up with questions is Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation on the regional markets and regional transmission. But my questions are around GreenLink specifically. I see where the routing is, and but I don't necessarily see where, and I'm asking, if it's been determined yet, where some of the collector substations are going to be. And my second part of that question is, will the utility be taking interconnection requests and before the line is built or the substations are built, but I guess obviously after the substations are sited?
Correct. Yes, very good question. Thank you, Senator Brooks. We will be taking applications for interconnections before the lines are placed in service. The collector stations, there are two proposed on GreenLink West and one currently across GreenLink North. And those they're not firm enough, the locations of those. As you know, we're doing routing and siting through the BLM, and they do the NEPA process, and it's really their decision and their process. We are the project sponsor, but we don't decide the route. That is decided, the least impact to our lands and our natural resources in Nevada. And with all the cooperating agencies, the cities and the counties and the tribes and the Department of Defense and all those agencies that participate that have concerns over the routing and siting because they have interest in the lands through there. And they are providing comments, and there's being environmental surveys and geotechnical surveys done on that before we can say this is where these collector stations are going to go. And if we start accepting applications for renewable interconnections right now, I think it would be a little bit of a disservice to those renewable developers. They might be entering an RFP and not bidding high enough, or missing out on that bid, losing it because they think their lead line to the collector station's longer than it really is going to be. And we would have to do the studies all over again, re-estimate the costs. So we want to get a little bit more certainty. And, I think when we get to a good point, when we feel like we're closer to a record of decision and the routes cited, we will communicate over our OASIS system, which is what the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission requires, at least 2 weeks in advance. So we will be accepting generation interconnection requests and transmission service requests, to those collector stations and over the line.
Thank you. And could I follow up, Chair?
Sure.
Of course.
And thank you for that answer. And on the permitting and routing side of this, I mean, I know that there are, by state and greater sage grouse issues. There are all kinds of environmental and cultural considerations on routing. Have you faced any insurmountable obstacles in your opinion in that process? And if you could just give me just a kind of like a brief update on what that permitting and routing process looks like.
Not so far that I've heard of. I don't have any of our really smart permitting folks and environmental folks on the phone here on the video, but we haven't run into anything that we don't think we can mitigate. But we are watching. There's some private lands, although it's probably 90% federal lands that we're crossing. Got some private land concerns, and just some expansion plans probably from the Department of Defense, and expansion plans, conflicts with some of the Native American, the tribal organizations. So, we're trying to work with all the constituents along the routing to find mitigation and alternative routes. We try to minimize the length of the route, so we don't want to have to go 80 miles around something because that's going to increase the cost to customers. So, but nothing insurmountable yet.
Thank you. And I just want to, thank you for the work that y'all are doing. I get a chance both through as a policymaker and in my professional life to talk to a lot of developers and transmission developers and renewable energy developers, and the work that you're doing and has sent kind of a message across the entire West and has really kicked into gear tens of billions of dollars of investment around transmission in the West and development in our state, which would just mean tens of thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars of tax revenue over the life of the project. So good job. And what we thought and hoped would be accomplished by doing this in statute we're already starting to see the results of it. And so I'm just appreciative of your efforts.
It's good to hear it. And I have to say the state BLM office has really stepped up. They realized the importance of this project to the state of Nevada, to our legislature, to our governor, and the economic development and the clean energy benefits that it brings. This is the most aggressive schedule NV Energy's had on a transmission project in the 32 years I've been here. And it's going very well because of the importance that's been placed on the project. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Assemblyman Ellison and Senator Hammond, you'll be after him. Assemblyman, you're still muted.
Hey, I'm looking at the map and I'm seeing like right there between Ely and Yerington, but some of the strongest, most powerful resources we have is hydropower up by Crescent Valley, Bewawi over by Fernley and down that way. And that doesn't even show on the map. That was my first question. The next one is the, we lost a large wind generation system right there between Idaho and Nevada up in the northern corner that was denied because of the sage hand. Don't you think you're going to run into a lot of these issues as we go along?
That is a different area than the Beowawe and Crescent Valley for those geothermal resources. But there are some geothermal resources, and again, we are going to have to go through this whole environmental impact statement and NEPA process and try to find mitigating factors, rerouting the line, and things like that. Now, the renewable developers will have to get their own permits, and they may face some of that as well.
Okay, yeah, because there's a may follow up, if I may, ma'am. Up to the north, there's a lot of geothermal that's being used, but it's still untouched compared to some of the other resources that they are using. And then, like I said, that's a natural resource that keeps on giving. So I'm hoping you take that into consideration. The hydropower is great. And then one thing you did discuss is moving water and hydropower up and down. And they did have a large project was under study, but it didn't go anywhere, where they'd pump the water upstream in the middle of the night when the demands were low, and then the next day when the demands were high, they'd take it back out of the lakes and move it back down. I thought that was pretty interesting. So.
Yeah, and that's becoming a lot more feasible now that we have a lot of the solar development that is very complementary and is providing the energy to pump it, during the day, and then when the sun goes down, have that energy from the hydro that was pumped up the hill. So it's very, very complementary. It solves a lot of the excess energy problems, and it's really a good use of the resources and combining them.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hammond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I think it's just 3 quick questions. I wanted to go back to the discussion of the RTOs, since it seems like we're taking those baby steps to get to that stage. And if someone wanted to do some research, I think it'd be really beneficial to kind of know a few things. And here's the things I wanted to know. Could you tell me the oldest RTO that's been around? And related to that, what's the newest RTO? And is there one RTO that's sort of the gold standard, something we could look at and go, they've got it right. Maybe they looked at mistakes that have been made in the past, how the organization is and so forth. And then that's the one you kind of want to look at a little bit.
Okay, so probably the oldest is the PJM. All the RTOs in the East, New York ISO, the New England ISO, and PJM, they all operated as very tight power pools. Takes about 5 of their states to fill the regional geography of the state of Nevada. So building interstate lines isn't that uncommon there as it is here, where you have these, multiple jurisdictions and regulatory commissions to get across and allocate the cost and things like that. And the newest is probably California or ERCOT. David Rubin would probably be able to answer that. The answer on what's the best is they each have really good attributes, and they all have really troublesome attributes. And some of them are more fitting for a state like Nevada, and some of them aren't. And as I'm part of the WMEG effort, very involved in finding our facilitator and things like that, which we're in the final stages of, we have told them that if we don't need to, we don't want to waste our time recreating something that's already been done. We want the best of all worlds. We want what's appropriate from us. If it's the resource adequacy program and with the California ISO has, and then the congestion management program that ERCOT has, and the the transmission planning at PJM, then take those pieces of their tariffs that have already been approved by FERC. You know, a large thing about markets is their resource adequacy and whether they have a capacity market, whether they have just price cap markets, or whether they require showings that they have the resources. And there's reasons for different models all around the country, some because they have a very strong retail access program, would have a capacity market because the smaller providers of service don't have access to building capital resources to serve their customers with. Whereas a place like the Southwest Power Pool would just have a resource showing program because there is no retail access to speak of in that footprint. One thing the state of Nevada can't do is be a regional transmission organization on its own. So it's going to take a lot of outreach and a lot of working with other partners, which is why we're going in the baby steps, because our neighbors in the West want to. And we can't say we're going to do it all within the state of Nevada, because then you're not a regional market. You're NV Energy operating as if it were a market, and that's what we already do today. So I'll just leave you with that. And David, oldest and newest, I don't know. David Rubin.
Oh, thanks, Carolyn. No, I think you said it really well. The ISO New England came out of the New England power pool, the type power pool that they did, the same with New York, and the same with PJM. So those were sort of the early efforts there. The Mid-Continent and SPP sort of grew similar to what, you know, potentially we're doing in the West with imbalanced market services first, and then evolving into what they call a day two, or more of the RTO market that we see today. So those are the ones that are newer. They didn't come out of the tight power pool the way the Eastern ones did.
I appreciate that. There's obviously, even as you're talking and you're saying things like WMAG, it just tells me that I don't know a lot. And so there's still a lot that before, you know, I make decisions, I need to know more. So I appreciate your willingness to give us more information, and I think that helps out. Thank you.
I'm sorry, WMAG is an effort with the 14 different utilities that Ryan was speaking about, and it's we had it up on the screen, but one of them was, and it's in your presentation.
No, look, I'm not blaming it. No, I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying that I totally get that when you're dealing with new information or something as big as this, and you're talking about it every day, you get that. I don't. I hate acronyms. I don't know if everybody else does too. I want to hurt people when they give acronyms out. But no, I truly do need to learn a lot more about this. But you know, I kind of get where you're going, and I'm really grateful for the presentation, because it did, as you were going along, talk about how you want to get into an imbalanced market, or at least that's the sort of the newest way to kind of get into getting into an RTO. And that's the kind of the stuff, I guess, that I was trying to learn. What have we learned over the years of trying to get into RTOs? And it sounds like the newer ones kind of baby stepped in by starting with imbalanced markets, and then what is that? And so you guys did a good presentation. So thank you again, and thank you for the question.
Thank you. And I will add one thing on that WMAG slide that you all have. LADWP is also a member now. They weren't when we created that, but they've also committed, and we also have Public Service of New Mexico. So there's two more entities in that group.
Growing.
Yes.
To hear. Members, any other questions for the presenters? Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee, for your time.
So next up, we're going to go back to the top of this section. We'll have Mr. Cameron Dyer, Managing Senior Staff Attorney with Western Resource Advocates, and Mr. Vijay Satal, Regional Energy Markets Manager with Western Resource Advocates, and they'll present information on the Western Resource Market and the opportunities it has for Nevada. So gentlemen, welcome to our committee, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Thanks for inviting us to present today. My name is Cameron Dyer, and as the chair mentioned, I'm an attorney for Western Resource Advocates. I'm also on the RTO task force along with Ms. Barbash. With me today is Dr. Vijay Satyal, the various regional markets manager. I'm going to begin sharing our screen real quick. All right, can everybody see that okay? All right, thank you. All right. For the sake of time, I won't go through our slide detailing who WRA is and what we do, but I'd just like to say that we are a nonprofit that impacts numerous areas of conservation across 7 states in the interior West and numerous areas of to protect climate, land, air, and water. Vijay and I are focused on energy issues, with my time focused entirely on Nevada. I'm going to pass the presentation to Dr. Satchel to talk through our work in Western regional markets, and then I'll come back to talk through how Nevada can impact those future potential markets more directly. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Can you guys hear me? Great.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Chair Moreno and all the Senate members. We appreciate the chance to speak. So I'm just going to carry the water for a little bit of the slide deck. And thanks to the Nevada Energy team for covering a lot of the regional current initiatives that are in play. But we're coming at this slightly differently, but having the same common message to give, that regional markets in the West are needed and helpful. As you can see from this visual, this really gives you a complete visual comparison of existing RTOs in the United States. And as you may realize, by the way, the electric grid in the US is not limited to the political boundaries. Our electric grid in the West especially does go into Canada as well. But you can see in the West, there's this big white gaping hole. And that's the region where we don't have a market. We have what's called bilateral markets for energy and transmission. And this is the area where we feel policy needs to change and to make a larger, ideally a large footprint ISO or an RTO to happen. And of course, Senator Brooks has been a champion in this regard in Nevada with support of many of you. But this is critical, not just because it sounds good, feels good to have one large footprint. It's also because it can really incentivize and foster more easy to develop renewable energy and also create automation and efficiency. If you go to the next slide, please. Thanks, Cameron. This is one of my favorite slides, and from my time prior to being at WRA for the last 3 years, I was at WEC as a senior policy advisor. And one thing I learned at WEC, which no other place taught me, is the huge degree of interconnectedness of the very West. So it sounds like a play of words, but the Western interconnection is truly diverse. It is so diverse that you can have geographic diversity of assets that should be better used. It should have resource variability across time zones that is not currently being used. So if you notice in both the scenarios that I brought up, I spoke that is not being used or not being enabled, that can be done. And a regional market would allow what's called situational awareness, enhance reliability, and help bring resources and transmission together. The one thing to be kept in mind, please, if you look carefully in this map, and Cameron will highlight it more in a very interesting way with a historical visual, you will see the dark lines of the green and the red lines and the Northwest. That's like the strong built current transmission system you can call the electrons highways. And you can see in the middle that we do have some transmission system, and I'm glad Nevada Energy is working to expand their transmission network, but that's what a market would enhance and incentivize better use of very same transmission system. So in other words, we have a donut system, which is not anymore a donut, but at least 20, 30 years ago, it was a significant big donut, and you'll see what we mean by that in a bit. Next slide, please. What does an organized market really mean? Everybody talks a lot about it in different ways. Caroline touched on it really well to your question, Senator Hammond, is that different markets have different services. Well, typically to the left, you will see on your screen, a good organized market should ideally have fewer BAs or balancing areas. So you have less checkbooks to manage the accounting for how much who's managing in supply to meet load. You also will try to have a common resource adequacy standard. I hope you would agree with me. We don't have different rules for seat belts in different Western states. We don't have different rules for using an Uber or Lyft in different Western states. We have common application to use an Uber, whether you are in Portland, Oregon, or in Carson City, Nevada, or in Salt Lake City, Utah, where I am. Same goes with a good organized market would be independent. It would have board members that are truly independent. The process is transparent, like the legislature works, and more importantly, you have non-profit intentions for the market operator to manage energy flow. If you do not have these characteristics, you are going to have, of course, the heavy hand of FERC oversight questioning the independence and the jurisprudence of a good, ethically and robust market to work. The three other things that are important for a good organized market is the ability and the facility to track greenhouse gas accounting, or what is the impact of fossil fuel versus non-fossil fuel. This is not necessarily to question why fossil fuel emissions are happening. This is to help create an inventory and manage that. That will help incentivize and move as we are decarbonizing the grid for economic reasons or reliability reasons. The last thing is transmission. Ideally, a single organized market has a single transmission operator that manages the transmission assets of the utilities that release it and allow it for centralized dispatch. The key words is centralized dispatch. And if you like, it's like an a la carte service, but a good organized market could include single or shared transmission planning. So you don't have a patchwork of different transmission planning processes that many regional transmission groups have. You don't have to have that if you want state level influence or voice, but you do need some of those items above the first 4 or 5 bullets that I spoke to. I'm not going to speak to the right side, but I kind of explained all that to you, but feel free to please look at that in your free time. But the essence of this functions to the right are the services. That is enhancing reliability, allowing for consistency of planning for demand and supply of energy, making sure that the processes of tariff setting and prices are transparent, clear, and market operating rules are well understood by buyers and sellers. And most importantly, I think even Nevada Energy will agree on this team, and our partners coming behind us, is the grid is changing. The grid economics is changing. So if we want an organized market, we just don't want it because it's cheap, efficient, or economical. It is also the need of the future as the society is changing. So next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through all of the details here, but there has been a question asked in the past, and when I presented a year ago in the Utah legislature, this came up as well, is how does regional energy markets help renewables? I've touched on it earlier, but I'll bring it up again in a different way. The geographic diversity, time and again, over 2 decades, we've had enough studies that have shown the diversity, if automated and used well, can truly enhance resource availability. You can help adjust where the load is not in peak state and where the load is low. You can adjust the resource diversity to ensure you have a large available pool of supply of clean energy options. The second thing it does is you are reducing curtailment, which is stopping the supply of energy that otherwise could be used. We do not see what we don't know, and what we don't know is how much renewable energy we are not able to bring onto the system. And the second is economics. You will see, and time and again, studies have also proven, not just studies, utilities investments are proving to see independent merchant projects are showing that zero carbon resources are also economical. And if they're dispatched well and automated well, you create consistency of planning. It can overall then help reduce costs, reduce wholesale energy acquisition costs that can help ensure more renewable energy is part of the larger mix. Let's go to the next slide, Cameron, please. So to summarize, I went into a bit of a deep dive. I'm coming back up the roller coaster. Is a good RTO development needs to think of these 5, 6 facets. To Senator Hammond and other senators' question, If you want the baby step approach, one example is that you develop an energy imbalance market. You have one in the West, you have one in the Southeast. They're trying, there's one with SP. Imbalance markets is typically a very good way to start just reserve sharing real time. WRA is a proponent of the day ahead market, but eventually it should all help the maturity of the concept to lead to a full RTO. The three boxes you see highlighted in some solid red shadow effect is the area that WRA is committed to and engaged in for the last 4 or 5 years, and we will be committing to engage in. One is improving the governance structure, making sure that utilities, public interest groups, consumer advocates outside California alone have an equal voice if there is a solution built that includes EIM entities that is outside California too. Or any RTO being developed in the West should have a fair, independent, transparent governance structure. We believe that you need to have good transparency and reporting metrics. If you don't have that, how would you know how well the RTO is functioning? This is important for state decision makers, regulators, policymakers, and legislators even like you all. And the third important thing for WRA, as we believe in a decarbonized grid, my language is not just show me the money, it's also show me the benefits. Show me how the air is getting cleaner, or show us how we are truly seeing green electrons, so as to speak, equally on the table as we've had fossil fuel resources in the past. So greenhouse gas accounting is not just for greenhouse gas impacts, it's to show the justification for future clean energy investments that are needed. And ironically, you'll be surprised to know fossil fuel generators also want greenhouse gas accounting, so it helps them better plan and deal with state requirements or RPS needs that they counter in their own portfolio. We have a proposal on that, by the way, and our white paper comes out on Friday, and we're leveraging our greenhouse gas proposal in different forums. Next slide, please. So I will get to the crux of what that is. WRA has worked with public interest organizations, but we've also met with the utilities. We've done 9 months of outreach and engaging with energy customer groups, utilities, and we are proposing a regional greenhouse gas accounting platform that is needed across the West. To prevent a big problem, what we have right now is a patchwork. We have some states with some greenhouse gas accounting. Please note, greenhouse gas accounting does not mean carbon pricing. You may want to track your greenhouse gas emissions with or without a carbon program in state. Whether you believe in a federal program or a regional program, you still need state level tracking. And this would enhance existing RPS tracking, which is only clean energy development, which is new generation. So we hope to and propose a structure and a tool concept that would not interfere with state level goals, not affect utilities from dispatching energy, but also help create a one-stop shop inventory to track greenhouse gas emissions and impacts from regional flow of electricity. Next slide, please. So where do we land here? Before Cameron takes over as our Nevada team managing attorney, and he helps run the effort for all things Nevada, I want to leave you with this. We don't want to just sell something that just sounds good, feels good. We recognize there are political and economic challenges. We recognize there's some regulatory areas to work on, and there are some market design challenges. How do you design the rules of the game? But these are all opportunities. These are not problems. There are ways that other regional markets have addressed losing control issues. So states have a voice. There's state committees that get engaged in a governance structure. There are ways to ensure state policy goals are not compromised. And there are ways to ensure how rules are designed on rate design so you can have wholesale benefits visible at the retail level. So there is a role for you all to play. There is a role in ensuring regulators can also work to make this happen. On the regulatory side, we do believe, WRA believes, and I'm sure Cameron will be happy to work with you all in every possible way to ensure sustainable infrastructure is built for meeting the needs of the future grid. We need to find ways for win-win environmental sustainable solutions that show land use being allocated and yet infrastructure can be built. And any state level approvals that need to be worked through. And the last thing I want to touch on is rules of the game called market design. There is a lot of challenges with how cost will be allocated across the system because of the existing way the grid is designed. Well, as we move towards the future, we will have to work through some adjustments and ensure how costs are managed, winners and losers are managed. But that's an area of interest for us, and we feel clean energy community, utilities, and public marketing agencies all have a common stake in this game, and this is where we're trying to work on. So I think I'll stop here, and I think Cameron takes over. Am I correct, Cameron? But thank you for allowing me to present.
Yeah, I
Thank you
do
so
take.
much. Mr. Dreyer, I failed to say it, and it's my fault. Before the presenters speak, could you just state your name again for the record? It makes it easier for our secretary to take records since we're not in the room together and they can't see who's
Yes,
speaking.
and my bad. I should have introduced myself better. Vijay Satyal with Regional Energy Markets at WRA.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Cameron Dyer with WRA for the record. So this first slide that I have here is a short list of select policy provisions that have sought to and successfully have addressed some of the impacts that our state has had on climate change. It's not meant to be exhaustive. It's meant to illustrate that Nevada has a long history of tackling problems and doing so in a measured, effective manner. For instance, the RPS was enacted in 2001, which I accidentally left off the slide here, and has been updated several times since. As you know, the governor's office, DCNR, and the GOE were instrumental in preparing and publishing Nevada climate strategy recently. NRS 455B .380 it was recently amended to require annual inventories for greenhouse gas emissions by the NDEP for the transportation and electricity production sectors. On this slide, the question is how to account for greenhouse gas emissions in Nevada. And as I just alluded to, the NDEP recently released its annual greenhouse gas inventory for 2021. If you haven't had a chance to review it, it's on their website and it's very educational. At a high level, the inventory focuses on the transportation and electricity production sectors. However, they also include the industrial sector in their current report due to the emission of certain highly potent greenhouse gases. They also do a quadrennial or every 4-year inventory that's much more comprehensive for the entire state. What you'll see in the report and what I've highlighted here, or called out here, is that the most important greenhouse gases for energy generation are carbon dioxide and methane. Fossil fuels generation converts methane to carbon dioxide to generate electricity. Where the state has made the most progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuel generation is converting existing fossil generation to renewables, such as solar and geothermal. Currently, our RPS is focused on electricity generation. What is needed is a shift away from the RPS to an attribute-based system that Dr. Satyal had discussed a little bit earlier. And this would focus on the consumption of energy that is consistent, easy to verify, can be done in real time, and accounts for power purchases that come from the market, with not necessarily with those attributes. As also noted, we have authored a white paper that will be ready for distribution at the end of the week. We will send that to Ms. Thomas for distribution to the committee when it's finished. On the next slide, this is the transmission donut. I'm using a relatively old map. This is from 1989, kind of highlighting how transmission in the West has developed a bit. And if you look at the map from Dr. Satyal's slides, there is some development of transmission in the Nevada whole here. However, much of that's not necessarily connected to our neighbors to the north and east. This is the same map, but with lines added to illustrate approximately where transmission has either been developed or will be developed. You already saw a more accurate mapping of the Greenlink path in India Energy's presentation. Just kind of walk through this on the right-hand side. It's the currently operating One Nevada line or online that runs from Las Vegas to kind of central eastern Nevada there. On the left is the Greenlink West line that was approved by the PUCN last year. And the red horizontal line is the Greenlink North that was subject to the provisions of Senate Bill 448 discussed by Mr. Weir and Ms. Mullen, and is currently at the PUCN as discussed by other folks, subject to a stipulation right now and approval by the commissioners. The other two lines listed here show the SWIP or Southwest Intertie project going north and the Trans Canyon Crosstie going east in yellow. Those are largely outside of NV Energy's control or control of the state. However, if they are approved and built, they would provide some of the needed transmission interconnection that would address the donut hole and convert the West into a transmission cake, if you will. So what does this mean for Nevada? And this is another map showing the Nevada with an overlay of the same transmission lines. However, it also has renewable energy zones shown on there. They're a little hard to determine, but you have geothermal zones, you have wind zones, and you have solar zones. What this is meant to illustrate ultimately is that the proposed GreenLink lines will touch on or be very close to existing renewable energy zones. The transmission proposed would provide access to native generation opportunities for Nevada's consumption, but also for export of any excess generation to other states through these proposed transmission lines. The lines would also allow Nevada to import renewable energy from other states. That would include wind and hydrothermal energy from our neighbors to the north and east. Sorry, not hydrothermal, hydrologically generated energy. So this type of import-export scheme is called geographic diversity, as Dr. Satchel mentioned, and serves several purposes. First, it ensures that the energy within Nevada can be delivered to the areas that need it. For instance, if there are thunderstorms over northern Nevada in the summer that impact solar generation, energy from other parts of Nevada can be sent to keep the lights on. The same is true in reverse. This is a very important component of reliability that an RTO would offer. Second, if Nevada is generating more energy than we need from renewable sources, we could sell that excess energy to our neighbors, commoditizing one of our most abundant resources, sunlight. Finally, as part of a regional market, any renewable energy that we generate will have attributes that will be fundamental to meeting other greenhouse gas reduction targets throughout the West. And this slide is kind of a response to the slide that Dr. Satchel did his portion on. And it prompts that the above outlined challenges facing Nevada in developing an RTO, these are ways that we could address those issues or at least think about them and kind of frame them in a solution framework here. For instance, governance is an issue. And what we need to do now is ensure that we are active and attentive to this issue to ensure that all stakeholders in an RTO are treated fairly. From a regulatory perspective, an RTO would make it much easier for Nevada to achieve our greenhouse goals and greenhouse gas reduction targets if we have regional partners. Another example is that we want to ensure that any system design results in greater benefits than costs. These are all feasible outcomes and items that we can look at in the proper planning and engagement by this committee and the RTO task force. That is all I have. Thank you for your time, and we are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you both so much for the presentation. Looks like Nevada is the central key to pulling all this together, filling that donut hole. And if Assemblyman Yeager is watching, I'm sure he loved the conversation about donuts. Members, any questions for the presenters? Lots of exciting stuff that we're doing. Senator Brooks.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reference, I think it's slide 12, where it shows the donut hole turning into a cake, I think is what you said, Kim, Mr. Dyer. And I think I just wanted to reference that SWIP North line, as well as that crosstie line, wouldn't really have the same value and potentially wouldn't even be like feasible if we didn't have GreenLink North and GreenLink West. And also that would open up access into the entire, Pacificor world and the Idaho Power and Bonneville Power world just by having those two built. And it also almost doubles, I believe, the directional capacity of the existing online line just by increasing the capacity at those substations with Greenlink West and Greenlink North. So that while those 4 or 5 lines don't necessarily tell the whole story, they do indeed fill that hole in the donut that you referenced, and it just starts a lot of energy capacity flowing through Nevada.
Cameron Dye for the record. Thank you, Senator Brooks. I think those are all very important points that I apologize for not hitting on myself.
But that's a great slide, and I plan on using that for future reference. I appreciate it.
Please do.
Members, any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you all for joining today and for the great presentation. Like I said, exciting things that we're doing here in Nevada and what it's going to, how it will impact not just Nevada, but the Western region. I'm excited about where we're going with this. So thank you so much for the presentation. So that brings us up to our final presentation today, and it concerns the economic benefits of a Western Regional Transmission Organization. And we have joining us Sarah Steinberg, Principal of Advanced Energy Economy. And I see that you just, there you are.
Yes, hi, Chair. Thank you very much. Let me just set up the screen share.
And I will just remind you just to state your name for the record before you start for my secretary.
Great. Well, thank you. This is Sarah Steinberg. For the record, I'm a policy principal with Advanced Energy Economy. And I first off want to thank the committee for giving me some time today on your packed agenda to talk about RTO, a regional transmission organization in the West. This is one of our favorite topics at Advanced Energy Economy. As many of you know, we're a clean energy industry association representing clean technology businesses and large energy buyers, and we work on issues related to a clean, reliable, and affordable energy transition in Nevada. So I just want to note here at the top that for the rest of this presentation, I'll be talking just about a full Western Regional Transmission Organization, which reflects the market structure with the greatest degree of coordination around the West, and ideally the largest geographic footprint. And that's going to be in order to ensure the most benefits. And a full RTO is, of course, what is now required by Nevada law by 2030. So just to start off, I want to congratulate Nevada on the significant progress it's made towards a Western RTO to date. This includes a huge thank you to Senator Brooks, the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, Governor Sisolak for passing SB 448 last session. That bill contained the strongest language supporting an RTO that we've seen to date in the West, which required utilities to join an RTO by 2030. This bill even beat Colorado to the same deadline by just a few days, which is very exciting for Nevada. Also want to commend NV Energy and the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada for supporting major necessary investments in transmission, which is key to helping move that low-cost clean energy from the places where it's most abundant, like Nevada, to population centers. Nevada's leadership and the future leadership of the Regional Transmission Coordination Task Force really puts the state in a crucial spot to help shape the conversation. Last time we talked about RTO before this committee was back in January of 2020. As you'll remember, the world looked really different back then, and these conversations were a lot more theoretical, but states and utilities are really moving now and discussing what this can and should look like. So for all of you, for the governor, for other state leaders, I think that just means not letting up, continuing to both monitor developments, be an active participant in conversations, and step up into leadership roles to ensure that the final market design does support Nevada's goals, including and especially its economic development and clean energy goals. So this presentation is going to note those benefits, but at AWE, we stand ready to answer questions and support you in navigating the developments moving forward. So to begin, this is everyone's favorite map. You've seen it from all three of your presenters today. And you've heard a lot from the other presenters about what an RTO is and what it can provide. So I'll just be quick here and emphasize again, an RTO is a competitive regional energy market that in essence is helping to ensure that the lowest cost energy, regardless of where it's generated around the West, is used to serve customer demand wherever that demand is, and at reasonable costs and benefits to the buyers and sellers of that energy. So an RTO is the platform that takes in all of those available energy resources across the geographic footprint and distributes it more efficiently. Nevada-based solar and geothermal resources will be able to be sold to the rest of the region, even when there's no additional Nevada demand to serve, which brings economic benefits back home. It also means that Nevada will be able to tap into, for example, the wind energy of Wyoming when its solar resources are not producing. More zero marginal cost renewable resources will be able to be brought online and integrated into our energy ecosystem, so long as they can be connected with energy demand to serve. So one other really critical feature of an RTO, as other presenters have mentioned, is that it can help coordinate long-term planning of big critical grid infrastructure like transmission and determine how the beneficiary should share in those costs. Transmission is hard to build and really expensive, but necessary for a reliable, resilient, and clean grid. So an RTO is really beneficial to developing that infrastructure. Ultimately, what this all means is that more solar and geothermal and other energy resources can be built in Nevada, which creates jobs and tax revenue for the host municipalities and counties. And as you've seen from other presenters, Nevada is that hole in the West in terms of transmission. So the regional connectivity is going to require a lot of transmission construction in the state, which creates more jobs and revenue. All of this, especially the improved grid efficiency and the coordinated planning, is going to add up to real monetary savings. So a study that was actually led by Western state energy officials, including Nevada representatives from the Office of Energy and the Public Utilities Commission, found that the gross benefits of a full RTO can be up to $2 billion by 2030, with $45 million annually flowing directly to Nevada. One of the ways it does this is just by simply reducing energy waste. Available low-cost clean resources will be more effectively deployed and less likely to be curtailed or turned off because they can't reach customers who have that demand. The low-cost resources are then displacing the production of energy from high-cost, often fuel-based generating plants that are more expensive to operate and also expose energy customers to more volatile commodity pricing. That's something that's really being felt by ratepayers this winter in particular as natural gas prices spike. The key here, I think, and one of the biggest takeaways I'd like for all of you to have from this presentation, Nevada has set out energy policy goals in legislation, in its climate strategy, in executive orders, and in regulation. Going it alone is going to cost Nevada energy consumers way more than it needs to in both energy and infrastructure costs, because Nevada would otherwise have to build and pay for everything itself. So an RTO really is the least cost pathway to a reliable, affordable, and clean energy future for the state of Nevada. I've alluded to this already, but this regional footprint is also really key to ensuring reliability and resilience. Those two things together mean keeping the lights on under as close to all conditions as possible. And that means building out resources for all hours of the day, in all seasons, and also to serve extremes when they happen. But those extremes are getting more and more extreme, like the prolonged heat waves that Nevada has experienced in some of its past summers. Regional collaboration through an RTO means that Nevada doesn't have to carry itself alone. If a severe temperature event is hitting Nevada and causes a number of its generators to go offline, or maybe requires a lot more energy to power up everyone's AC units for longer than expected, Nevada will still have access to energy from, for example, Oregon, which maybe is experiencing different weather conditions. What happened in Texas last year, I think, is a good example that we talk about. Had Texas had this platform and infrastructure to share more energy across its borders, it might have been able to import energy when its own generation plants froze. So this is not some be-all and end-all solution to reliability and resilience. There's a lot more work that needs to be done to support distributed energy resources and microgrids to keep homes and neighborhoods and critical facilities running during different sorts of extremes, but it is really a key component to a grid that's sort of ready to face the expected unexpecteds, especially temperature extremes. And as you all know, a reliable grid is really key to economic health. Energy intensive businesses and industries, especially in including entertainment venues and data centers, need to be assured that their operations won't be adversely affected by grid conditions. And that gives them confidence to operate in Nevada. But furthermore, large energy users, like some of those that I just called out, who are often large employers, generally or sometimes prefer to site their businesses in regions where they are being served by an RTO. This is because an RTO provides more energy purchasing options for them to meet their sustainability or clean energy goals. Nearly half of the largest publicly traded companies in this country today have clean energy commitments. That number is growing. And RTOs offer access to what we call virtual power purchase agreements, which is one of the primary vehicles for companies to procure clean energy, which require a renewable energy developer to be able to deliver their power into a wholesale market. RTOs also offer transparency into energy and capacity pricing, which helps craft green pricing programs, which is another avenue that companies can use to access and sort of claim clean energy resources to match their goals. And RTOs offer more value streams for aggregated distributed energy resources, like, for example, solar on a home or business, and storage and demand response. These resources can serve real grid needs while benefiting the resource owners and sort of are magnified when they can access an RTO. And then finally, RTOs offer single transmission rate and better open access to the transmission system, which enables market entry for more cost competitive resources and better connects potential buyers and sellers of advanced energy resources. So all of this is to say that an RTO provides Nevada with a pathway towards its goals while also benefiting the state's economy with both energy and non-energy jobs, lower cost, clean, reliable energy to serve Nevada customers. And that's why I think you see support for the RTO provisions of SB 448 last session coming from across the board. That's businesses, that's clean energy developers, that's large energy users, environmental NGOs, and more. So the logos here came from a sign-on letter in support of the legislation and its provisions to require utilities to join an RTO by 2030. Nevada is, of course, not the only state making moves towards an RTO. As I mentioned, a Colorado bill last session also required utilities to join an RTO by 2030. The Colorado Public Utilities Commission just determined an RTO to be in the public interest. The Oregon Department of Energy just published a report finding that more regional coordination would be beneficial for the state and region. And then conversations continue to take place across various other venues, which include the Western Governors Association, Committee on Regional Electric Power Cooperation, and Western Interconnection Regional Advisory Board, and also between major utilities across the West, including NV Energy. Also want to shout out here that FERC commissioners are fully supportive of a Western RTO and have indicated their willingness to let the West take the lead to design something new that really works for the West and its unique needs. I think, there were some questions earlier on about what these other RTOs in other regions look like. And we've learned a lot of good lessons from those RTOs and can take the elements we like and use those, mix and match, create new things, all to serve this region. So the West is really stepping up to do just that and should continue to do so. So to close out, I've listed here a number of the items that the newly formed task force is going to study, and we look forward to assisting it. The task force really does have the opportunity to maintain Nevada's leadership role as states discuss what this RTO of the future and RTO for the West and by the West should look like. Nevada's really at a competitive advantage here because of its first mover status with the legislation, because of its geographic position, it's really critical to making an RTO work and making sure those benefits are all realized across the entire West. So really do commend the committee and the legislature and the governor for all of the work to position Nevada to date on this complicated but really critical topic. This work to establish something really new is hard and difficult, and there's different interests in the different states, but keep up the momentum and keep up the conversation, because an affordable, reliable, clean energy grid really does require a Western RTO at the end of the day. So I am happy to take any questions, but that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions for Ms. Steinberg? Questions, comments? I guess that means you gave a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And Senator Brooks, thank you for the work that you've been doing on this for the past few sessions. As a legislative body member of it, I appreciate the work that you've been doing. So we had a packed agenda, but we got through it pretty fast. And that brings us up to the very last item on our agenda. And that's our second session of public comment. And just as a reminder, I ask public that are calling in to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less so that we can accommodate all that want to speak. Make sure you state your name for the record before you get started. And if you choose not to speak now, there's other options if something comes to you later to get your comments to us. So I will ask our BPS staff, do we have anyone in the waiting room wishing to make public comment?
Thank you, Chair. To participate in public comment, please press the raise hand in your Zoom window or *9 on your phone to take your place in the queue. Okay, Chair, there are no participants wishing to participate in public comment at this time.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to thank all of our presenters. Make sure that I am unmuted. All of our presenters that were able to join us here today, and the members, thank you for jumping on for our first meeting. Being that we have no one in our waiting room wishing to make comment, this will conclude today's meeting, but put on your calendar, our next meeting is scheduled for March 9th, 2022, and it'll begin at 10 a.m. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great day.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Goodbye.